Final thoughts, Jeff.
Final thoughts? I got a headache. I'm really tired. No,
Final thoughts, Jeff.
3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Final thoughts. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We love you. Stay around. Hang around. There's more to come. Some stuff you may expect. And some you may not.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's over with. This guy was crying the whole time. I really am embarrassed for him. I don't know what we have left. I really don't. Tonight the cast is here to reflect, to dissect, and to hopefully answer the question that I think is on everyone's mind right now. What the hell just happened?
Ladies and gentlemen, beloved of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Banal of America Audio, with your host, Tim Banal. What is going on, my friends? This is Tim Banal of banalofamerica.com with another edition of BOA Audio Season 5. No serious in-house notes here at the beginning of the show, except that we are obviously still looking for feedback regarding BOA 2.0, the new look for Banal of America. We launched it about 10 days ago or so, and we've got tons of great feedback, tons of insight into what people like and don't like and want to see changed or returned to the old way. But, of course, we always want to hear more from the folks who are visiting Banal of America and have thoughts on BOA 2.0. So head on over to BOA, check out the new face of Banal of America, click contact, and send us your thoughts on BOA 2.0. That's it for the in-house notes, so let's get down to business here on this week's edition of the program. Our guests are the co-hosts of the popular paranormal podcast Paratopia, Jeff Ritzmann and Jeremy Vaney, and they're joining us here for a special episode dubbed Aloha to Paratopia. And it's called Aloha to Paratopia for two reasons. Obviously, first of all, the lost illusion, but that's really about as far as the lost element goes. And the second one is, as I explain later on when the interview kicks up, aloha is the perfect word here for this situation because Paratopia is saying goodbye to their classic version of the program and then in turn welcoming a whole new style for Paratopia starting this week. So we're going to get into all that stuff with the boys from Paratopia. We're going to look at how the program first came about, why they're changing the style of show, and how the whole change is going to happen, how it's all going to shake out, how people can be a part of the new Paratopia. Then we'll look at some classic moments on Paratopia over the last year and a half, including the infamous Emma Woods series of episodes, Jeff and Jer's ghost hunting expedition, as well as their trips to the X Conference. Clearly, I am good buddies with Jeremy Vaney. We co-hosted the Lost Cast this past spring, and we featured Jeff Ritzmann on the program numerous times. So we're all good friends here on this week's edition of the program. And as happens when we have repeat guests on the program or old friends, the conversation definitely turns into a general jam session over the course of the 2+ hours. And we're going to be jamming on ufology, exopolitics, the paranormal research community, podcasting, and a whole bunch of other big picture elements of esoterica. So not only do you have the big tentpole topics we're going to be talking about, but the conversation definitely turns into a jam session along the way. All in all, really, it is a peek behind the Paratopia curtain with the always entertaining Jeff Ritzmann and Jeremy Vaney. Think of it as a post-show after-party with the boys from Paratopia. It is aloha to Paratopia, goodbye to the classic version, hello to Paratopia 2.0. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Jeff Ritzmann and Jeremy Vaney, allow me to give you a bit of background on them. Since it is two guests, I'm going to have to trim a little bit from their bios. You can find the complete bios at BOA or at their website, which you'll hear at the end of this bio segment. Jeff Ritzmann has been actively involved in UFO research for just over 20 years. He refers to his involvement as a personal one after several odd events in his life from age 5 on prompted him to explore the field of UFO research. In an effort to learn more, he's applied his work as a digital imaging professional to the ever-growing pile of UFO photos and videos, and has become a recognized image analyst in the UFO field, working on visual data. He was the primary image analyst in the O'Hare UFO case, and is cited in the NARCAP report of the event for his work. He's also worked on landing trace cases and experiencer support investigations. Jeff has also provided footage and information on cases to the History Channel and the Gulf Breeze UFO Conference. Working with AboveTopSecret.com, the internet's largest alternative topics message board community, Jeff has done examinations on multiple UFO cases as their image analyst. His experiences with the UFO phenomenon continue to the present day. And then we have Jeremy Vaeni. Jeremy Vaeni is a writer-producer kind of guy, pumping out everything from books to music videos to feature films. He's also a columnist and editor for UFO Magazine, as well as director of Culture of Contact, a New York-based conglomerate of artistic experiencer types who like to sponsor and produce events around the city. He's the author of I Know Why the Aliens Don't Land, and producer of the feature documentary No One's Watching, an Alien Abductee's Story. Collectively, their website is www.paratopia.net, paratopia.net. Check it out for Paratopia 2.0, the all-new stylings of Jeff and Jeremy, and the complete archive of the classic version of Paratopia, 70 episodes, including a slew of interviews with esoteric luminaries. And now, without any further ado, let's rock and roll. This interview was recorded on June 9th, 2010. Jeremy Vaeni and Jeff Ritzmann say aloha to Paratopia on BOA Audio, Season 5. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Banal of America Audio. We've got two guests here for you this week. It is a special episode. I'm calling it Aloha to Paratopia. And as I explained to Jeremy before we started the interview, aloha means in Hawaiian hello and goodbye, which is perfect for this situation that the folks at Paratopia find themselves in, as they're saying goodbye to the old format and hello to the new format. So it's the perfect word, and plus we wanted to tie in the whole Lost thing. So now I can pretend I'm Jimmy Kimmel, and we're saying aloha to Paratopia with Jeff Ritzmann and Jeremy Vaeni. If you're a listener to the Lost Cast, you've heard them on the program before. If you're a listener to Paratopia, you've heard them for the last year and a half on their program, which has recently sort of in the midst of undergoing a change from, I guess you could call it, traditional podcast, I suppose is the best way to put it, to listener content-driven podcast. Very experimental idea, but very exciting as well. We're going to talk about all that stuff, talk about the evolution of Paratopia and the world of paranormal podcasting, as crazy as it is. So welcome to the show. Jeremy, you've been on before, so welcome back. And Jeff, welcome to BOA Audio.
Thank you, sir.
You're not going to be talking over each other the whole time, are you?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you almost did it again. Anyway, so for folks out there who are unfamiliar with Jeff Ritzmann, Jeff, why don't you give us a little, thumbnail bio? Who is Jeff Ritzmann? How'd you get mixed up in the paranormal scene?
I'd say he's relatively unimportant. Let's move on to bigger things. Now, I started in this about 22 years ago this year. Basically, I don't know, more or less got into it trying to look into my own experiences, and subsequently through my career as doing digital imaging, I've kind of lent my help where I can to AboveTopSecret.com, where I was more or less their official image analyst for a while. And I've worked on a lot of image cases over the years, and I guess wrote more than a few exposés on the hoaxes that have come across my table. Aside from that, it's been pretty much I don't know, in the league of field investigation and digital imaging. So that's kind of where my strengths seem to lie with this thing. So I've been doing that for a long time, took a break and came back and found Jeremy, and we started doing the podcast together. I mean, that's roughly how it's been going.
All right. Jeremy, how about you? How about a little bio for the folks who somehow missed your earlier appearance on the show?
Well, I'm a failed comedian, Tim. Wait. Well, let's see. I'm an experiencer. I ended up writing a book and writing for UFO Magazine and starting a conference called Culture of Contact. And through that process, I ended up on Coast to Coast and infamously got booted from Coast to Coast, and that put the fire under my butt to start podcasting and sort of do it myself. And then when I was all ready to hang it up, I met Jeff in the process. And when I was ready to hang it up, he said, hey, instead of hanging it up, why don't we join forces? And I said, that's so crazy, it just might work. And the rest is history.
All right, so that's sort of like your backgrounds and sort of how you came together to form Paratopia.
Right.
All right, let me see here. I didn't really come into this with too many questions, so I guess
that's good. We've only got 2 hours to cover, so that's good.
Well, I suppose we'll cut right to the chase in a way and sort of tackle the latest news here, with you guys sort of making the transition from one style of program to the other. How did this whole thing come about? How did you come up with the idea? And, give us some background on, what happened here with Paratopia.
Well, why don't you take the origins there, Jeff, because you did most of that, I think.
The old direction essentially was looking at the scope of paranormal podcasts out there and seeing not only a lot of the same repeat guests, but also kind of the repetitive nature of what people were covering in the paranormal. And I don't know, I kind of looked at the whole podcast scene as kind of akin to Ghost Hunters. It's like every week we get an investigation, we get a review, and we get a reveal. And it's kind of like, yeah, we get it. It's all real. Let's go a little further. And so I think that's pretty much where I said to Jeremy, we're not going to cover the normal fare that most of these podcasts do. We're going to try and go a little bit deeper, and we're going to try to go outside the field, because I've said for a long time now that I don't think any good answers that could possibly be had, or better questions, which is really what we should be looking for, are going to come forth out of ufology or the paranormal field in general. I think we have to go outside and start looking in different directions that might not always be within the interest of, just say, the UFO-interested public, or the paranormal-minded public. And so that's what we started doing. We just started delving into hypnosis, into quantum physics, into all sorts of different professions and disciplines, and just trying to look for some sort of thread to pull on that might, I don't know, for a scientist to come on and say, well, what you're describing in an experience kind of sounds like X, and let's discuss that.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, that was the premise for doing this show, is just to go in a different way.
Well, but also then the comedy, which I think a lot of people attributed to me, and I sort of drove it, I guess, but I think it was actually originally Jeff's idea, which was, let's do it like a sort of an old radio serial where we have a running plot. Mm-hmm. Let's call it Paratopia. Let's do an island theme, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I believe it was actually your idea, no?
I think so. I mean, I guess I kind of dropped out and away from listening to a lot of podcasts because they were just so also goddamn serious. And I thought, well, this used to be fun. Like when I first got into this, I met interesting people, and we go to Denny's after MUFON meetings and stuff. Like, it was fun. And so why can't it be fun and still learn something and still make a point? And so I thought, well, Jeremy's a great skit writer. Why couldn't he write skits for this show? And we kind of like hook people into a good laugh and have some fun, and then have them stay around for the serious discussion. So that was the basic premise of the whole thing.
Yeah, I think we were under the delusion that with the comedy we would actually be attracting new blood who would then, stick around for the paranormal stuff. Maybe they'd come in thinking it was a joke, and then they'd be roped into the deep discussion. But it actually kind of, I think with these podcasts you have a certain audience, and that audience actually first did not want the comedy. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some of them didn't want the comedy, but I think most people came around to at least tolerating us, if not finding it funny.
And you also have to realize that, by and large, most of the comedy was treated like, it was more or less like a political cartoon of the paranormal. All of it
like
had a distinct, all of it had a distinct point we were trying to make with it, but some people just said, well, this doesn't have any place in this because you won't be taken seriously. It's the paranormal.
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, come on, like we're in the none of us are being taken seriously.
Exactly.
Once you step,
you might as well have some fun while you're trying to poke around in different venues and see what you got. So that was the idea.
Now I think.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say with the new direction, my thinking with it is, okay. Again, we found ourselves in a position of both kind of wanting to quit at the same time, and instead of doing that, we realized we have this large audience. It'd be a shame to let them go. Why not do listener content, but not just like YouTube of the paranormal type stuff, but actually produce it in a way where we're driving that. We're asking them the types of questions we'd like to hear from them, and we're trying to get the audience to actually be in on the critical thinking, so they're not just listening to us ramble on and on, but they're actually part of the rambling on process in a way that I hope produces a better critical audience who's also not afraid to speak up. I think that's sort of the missing element at this point. I think, just even in terms of the fact that we did this, this series on Emma Woods and hypnosis, and the people who heard it were really affected by it, and it was really, nailed sort of David Jacobs' career shut in a way, but did it because it didn't really break on like ATS or any of the big paranormal forums, because it's a rational topic that you can get your head around. It's not something that caters to the imagination. It's sort of a black and white issue in a way. So I think seeing that was disheartening, and I think like if there's a way to make the audience be more self-aware, more critical, more intelligent in how they listen and how they view all of this stuff, then maybe the next time a story like that breaks, it will break big.
Well, I know that they've been waiting on a cover story on the Emma Woods thing at UFO Magazine for a while now, so.
Well, they can keep waiting.
So it was sort of like just general fatigue and then a decision to take it in a different direction to sort of engage the audience more. Is that what I'm hearing here?
Well, to make the audience engage the questions themselves more. You know?
If I can interject this, the other part of this is that George Hansen, our favorite guest, trying to become involved in this, at least from my end, and I can't really speak for Jeremy about this, but I know he sees the points that I make about this whole thing about being involved in the paranormal community at all, sooner or later earns you the ire of certain people, which then compounds into all sorts of unpleasantness, whether it be offline or online. And oftentimes, not only is that a factor in absolute debilitation of trying to produce a show that actually means something, because it occupies more of your time than actually looking at the field or the subject that you're trying to study.
Yeah, exactly.
You become engrossed in other of these side tangent things, which I believe is part and parcel to how this works. And so when you're talking about starting something that's going to be user-generated content, I kind of feel like if we spread the responsibility of generating this show in the same direction that it's been heading, which is in these new and different directions, then I think everyone at that point is kind of shouldering a little bit of that burden, in that it won't just be Jeremy and I who will, I don't know, I'm not going to say anybody who generates a podcast for us is going to get a load of crap from someone. It's not like that.
Just Sandy.
But it's just, right. It's just kind of like we're moving forward with this as a community. And I think as a community, as more than a person or two people, I think it's easier for us to get at this if we all move together as a group rather than two guys or a guy forward on that. It's kind of everyone kind of shouldering that burden. I guess you could call it a burden of sorts that seems to come along with being involved in the subject. So hopefully that'll work. I think it presents for those smegmas out there who like a target. I think it provides a moving target, which is good.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it won't be the same host every week.
Yeah.
I just think that ultimately is going to be a useful way to present all of this as a community rather than just two guys.
Just trying to throw off the trickster, essentially.
Yeah. That's essentially it.
The trickster and the haters out there who just... they're
one and the same.
Exactly, yeah. So now, how exactly is this all going to work? On a technical level, like someone, let's say Sandy, since we just love using Sandy as an example. Let's say Sandy wants to create Like, how do they create their content for your show? How's this going to work?
Well, she can either.
Don't pick on Sandy. Sandy's a great guy.
Yeah. No,
Sandy's awesome.
What you'll do is you'll email us at paratopiapodcast@gmail.com your idea for a show, and one of us, most likely me, will get back and say, look, this is what we'd like to see you address with this show, A, B, C, D. And either we'll record it for you or you record it and send it to us, and it can be up to 2 hours. So that's part of it. Another part of it is, based on what we hear, we may set people up with interviews, with luminaries in the various fields of their choice. And anyone who's been a past guest on our show can also come on, do a lecture, do an interview, whatever it is that they want to do. They've got up to 2 hours to do it. So it's all of that together. And so far, I mean, I've pre-recorded some stuff and had some stuff sent to me, and it's great. It's going really well. So it's really easy because all you really need is a microphone. Barring that, I mean, I've got the recording technology, so you could arguably just talk over the phone. And if you're embarrassed in talking to me over the phone, I can just put my mic on mute, hit record, and walk away. And when you're done, you hang up.
Well, I like it too because, like Jeff was saying about the burden part, in a way, it sort of puts like the onus of responsibility back on the audience in a way, or at least you can do that in the sense where, I mean, we've all had people out there that like critique the show, but they don't produce their own show or anything. So now you can be like, you know what, dude, episode XYZ of the new Paratopia belongs to you, asshole. So go, let's see what you can bring to the table, because now, we're throwing down the gauntlet at you. So I kind of like that, but I don't know if you'll if you'll do any of that. You know what I mean? It's just
right.
That's the frustrating part, because it's like, anyone can do this, dude, as we're finding out as the year goes by.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I don't want to give the impression that if someone gives us an outline for a podcast that we're going to read it and we're going to twist it around to make it what we would do.
Right.
I mean, I think there's still a lot of freedom on their end to talk about whatever subject matter that they want that pertains to paranormal, subjects. I think that we're just going to put in, these are the points that we're going to require that you address if you're going to talk about this subject.
Well, part of it is building a story.
Everything else from there, is your deal. I mean,
part of it is
you're running the
story,
show.
though, Jeff. Like people will say,
Sure.
okay, here's my life story, and like 4 or 5 things will like jump out at me, and I'll be like, okay, these are huge. Like, I've never heard this, and now
Absolutely.
here's the way you build this, and so that it looks like a narrative.
Exactly.
But it's still their story. It's still them telling their own story. It's just Here, I think, are some highlights that you need to think deeply about and not just gloss over.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So we're not just going to puppet these people in front of us, as toys. This is going to be their gig, and they're going to go through it just as if they would do it. Only there are going to be certain criteria that have to meet a standard, because I think we have set a standard at Paratopia for certain things. And I think by and large we've, in the last so many episodes, we've ignored the detractors of certain things, or the people who would malign others for no apparent reason. And that's not something that we're going to allow. We're not going to really get into, I want to do an expose of this guy or that girl, or that's not what we're after. I mean, we're after talking about the subject and how your take on it may be something that we've never thought of before. And I think, again, more heads on the problem may equal some kind of better alternative to what is currently being discussed out there.
Yeah, well, I think it's exciting. I'm excited to see how it develops, and it's good to give these people a chance to sort of develop their own stuff. So, first of all, they can see fucking how hard it is to produce shows, and they can also sort of become a part of the process, which is great. I know you said you didn't want to do these expose episodes, but of course, as you sort of alluded to already earlier, the Emma Woods one probably was the most, like, ground-shaking episode you guys did, or the most ground-shaking series of episodes that you guys did. I mean, is that safe to say?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say. I don't even know if I call that an expose as much as it was just news.
That's true, yeah. I mean, I'll agree with that. Yeah, because, I mean, that was out there already. It's not like you guys dug up Emma Woods and brought her out there. I mean, you guys were the ones who showcased her stuff. obviously there was a firestorm of reaction to the whole story and everything, but did you guys, did you feel the heat from it, or was it more just people getting upset over the story? Were they upset that you were biting the hand that feeds you in a way? Do you know what I mean? I can imagine, I'm picturing sort of the mindset of some people where at the end of the day, you protect the field above all else at the detriment of truth, if you will.
I got some of that. I think originally we got it from people who were huge David Jacobs fans and were like, how could you besmirch this noble man? And then once the evidence became just completely overwhelming and his response was so lackluster, that completely went away. And then it was a matter of, I think, rival shows, or let's say rival show and various people on and associated with that show coming after us, probably for personal reasons, masking it as, coming after us for this or something. But so there were those two elements, but I really only had one live in-person encounter with a friend of David Jacobs who, and this was after we had done the whole series of shows, and he was really upset. I mean, he sounded like Jacobs. He sounded like he had read only Jacobs' rebuttal and nothing else, and none of the evidence. And so he was repeating it back to me. And, I'm pretty educated on the subject at this point. So it was like, no, you don't understand that. You're not making any sense. And I understand that he's your friend, but, that has nothing to do with this. So, I don't know if that's really the sort of don't rock the boat with this, don't kill the sacred cow.
Yeah.
I think it had more to do with people's friendships and people's fandom than anything else. Yeah.
I guess we should probably give people sort of a primer on the whole Emma Woods thing so they know what we're talking about. And, of course, they should go and check out the series of Paratopia episodes where you guys discuss this. But for people who are listening and haven't heard the whole story, can you give us a thumbnail on the whole Emma Woods thing?
Well, basically, Emma Woods, she's going to see a psychologist about her abduction-type experiences, her lifetime of experiences. Psychologist says, I don't know what to do with this. Recommends her to David Jacobs. Now, doesn't know anything really about Jacobs, just that he's one of the foremost authorities in the world. So, needless to say, they contact Jacobs. Jacobs, she becomes one of his star clients. It's going to be like her and this other woman who are, he's really concentrating on, and, his new book is going to be about and all this. Now, at some point, this gets completely retarded. They're doing hypnosis over the phone, first of all. They've never met in person. So right there, it's bad. So they're doing hypnosis over the phone, and he is sort of co-creating a story of alien hybrids with her under hypnosis, partially by telling her what other people have said under hypnosis while she's hypnotized. And then they get into, what's going on with her, and it all sort of bleeds into each other. And then another woman, and these are pseudonyms. Emma Woods isn't her real name, and this other woman, Elizabeth, that's not her real name. But this other woman, Elizabeth, who he is also a subject of his, she starts sending him instant messages. Or she claims she's not sending them. Rather, evil hybrid aliens are sending them from her computer, sort of putting her in a trance and forcing her to do this, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So he's getting these instant messages from hybrids, and they're all like, we know you're on to us, so we're going to take care of you. Jacobs is getting scared. He thinks hybrids are after him. It never dawns on him to ask Elizabeth, hey, are you hoaxing me here? Are you pulling a fast one? Now, add to this that Emma Woods has a sleep disorder that makes her get up and do stuff at night. And part of what she does is send him and her psychologist and Elizabeth emails just saying things like, help me. Things like that, which she then interprets as the hybrids doing this. So it becomes this whole giant story of David Jacobs running from evil aliens. And so the way that he protects himself is to use these, what he calls tactics, which involved, but we're not limited to, but certainly involved, hypnotizing Emma Woods, implanting in her the notion that she has a multiple personality disorder, and he knows it's a multiple personality disorder, and that's what he believes all abductees suffer from, and that's what his next book is going to be about. So that way, the next time the aliens abduct her, they will read her mind, they will read that about him, and they will be thrown off his trail. So this is now the beauty of this is she's got pretty much all of this on tape. So she's got the audio of her hypnosis sessions. She's got the audio of her talking to David Jacobs and trying to say, look, at some point she comes to her senses and says, this isn't right. Something isn't right about this, and I need to stop this. And he doesn't trust that in her breaking off the relationship that she's going to do right by him. So there's this audio tape 8 on her website that is just the most fascinating, voyeuristic, sort of awful thing that you can listen to of her trying to convince him that she's going to break away, she's going to do her own website, but she needs to tell people why she broke off her relationship with him in a way that makes them all look okay.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't trust it at all, and it just becomes just ridiculous. It becomes this sort of ridiculous reality show where you realize, wait, all of this stuff is just nonsense. Like this gets back to what we, and actually Jeff more than I, because I certainly did read all those hypnosis books by Bud Hopkins and Jacobs and Mack. So more Jeff than me realized that whole narrative of hypnotically retrieved stuff was just bunk, was garbage. And so here it is in action. Here's why. It's like it was one of those things that we always sort of suspected, or Jeff actually sort of felt he knew, but here it is in action. Here's exactly why. A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
How this thing happens in a human being under hypnosis, with these abduction researchers.
It was almost like the abduction community's worst nightmare combined with the skeptics' sheer delighted that they finally had a way to show exactly what they've been talking about all along almost.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think a lot of the reactions that we got, one of the things that we didn't mention is that I think you could pretty much surmise that a lot of letters that we got that were negative against that show and against the other show that was kind of just prior to that was Dr. Scott Lilienfeld, who had written the book Pseudoscience and Psychology, in which he covered the problems with this regression hypnotherapy and how it's being used. It was used for everything from satanic ritual abuse to alien abduction to name your poison. And he went over with us on a prior show to all of this blowing up, just why this is such a bad practice. And I've been searching for someone like him for years to come on and to level his expertise and his authority on this subject to the UFO community, because I've been staring this in the face for years. I've been present at conferences where people that I knew from abduction support groups and whatnot were laying down in a hotel room and letting their buddy do this to them. And I'm thinking, this is not right. Is this where you're remembering these things from your buddy telling you you're getting sleepy? Now, where are the aliens? This just aggravated me for years. So to get somebody like Scott Lilienfeld on was great. And I think that immediately evokes a response from people whose only memories of an experience and who call themselves experiencers derive all of their memories from hypnosis.
Right.
There may be a small portion of it where they feel like they may have had missing time, and then they go forth to seek out somebody like David Jacobs or Bud Hopkins or whoever is engaging in this still, which I can't imagine anybody would after listening to Lilienfeld. And then that's where their memory comes from. Through the years, we've seen that if you take Hopkins, Jacobs, and Mack, and you put them all together, and you look at their line of experiencers that they put under the spell, you could see definitive differences in the storylines and the narrative that goes throughout all of these stories per abduction researcher. That in itself makes no sense, and that ought to tell everyone something about hypnosis. And so I think a lot of people who wrote us and didn't like those episodes, that was because it negated their experiences as something they should seriously question, if not outright dismiss. And so that's possibly where a lot of that negativity came from with those episodes.
Yeah, because they're left wondering what the fuck. They're back at square one.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, they should be.
I know.
Well, that's a huge bone of contention on our forum, where people saying, "Really? So, what are we supposed to do? Just throw out all hypnosis testimony?" It's like, yeah. Sorry, that's called science.
That's kind of what I was saying in the earlier convoluted question that I had. That to me, the whole thing was fascinating because it did upset the apple cart so much. Because abduction seems to have split off from ufology back like in the late 80s or something, and now it's doing its own thing, and to the detriment of ufology, it's sort of just taken as a peripheral assumed part of the field, when I still think that it shouldn't be even related to UFOs. That's just my opinion. Like, I just don't think, I think we need to have a more serious delineation between abductions and UFOs. Because I don't see, aside from some interesting cases and stuff, like, I don't know, I just have all kinds of issues with abductions, but I thought that, what you guys did really sort of shined a spotlight back on abduction, as it had kind of been allowed to go on its merry way, unexamined by ufology any longer. Do you know what I mean? It seemed like the ufology just let it pass after a while. So I'm glad that you guys did what you did. I have no qualms with it.
Unfortunately, the bad part for me, and this is my personal opinion of this, is that, unfortunately, the years that this has been left to go on without challenge from within the community at all, or very little, I would say, I know some people who've spoken out publicly about it and been crucified for their take on it. I certainly have gotten more than my share of venom because of what I said about hypnotically retrieved memories and the notion of using it for experiencer memory retrieval. But this whole thing and the people involved, I say most involved in it, being the Hopkins, the Jacobs, the Max, it's not that these are, I don't look at these men as evil people. I do think that there's misguidance there. I think that there's a lack of critical thought there. But unfortunately, like it or not, their work has completely colored the public's perception of what this experience is. And so the minute that you tell someone, I've had some experiences with what are most commonly referred to as UFO occupants, immediately it goes to hybrids and alien fetuses and the taking of sperm and ovum and the probes. Oh Christ, the probes! That's and that all is born out of that narrative that's been painted for the past 20 years now,
right,
or more. And that's the most unfortunate part of all of this. And like Jeremy said, people on our board said, well, does that mean we have to throw it all out? And yeah, the answer is yes. And then the question after that is, well, where do we go from here? I don't know, but find a way.
Exactly, dude.
How about just, you don't there are, and this is the other thing that just aggravates the hell out of me, is that there are a lot of people out there, just like myself, who remember stuff completely outright as it happens. And there is no need for hypnosis. If I'm not saying I remember every minute detail of what I've experienced. There are some blank spots. Am I interested in poking around at those? No, thank you.
Yeah.
I know what I experienced outright through the majority of it. If there's something I don't remember, there's probably a reason for that. So there's plenty of people out there that remember things directly. And so to go poking around on people whose memories are sketchy at best is a poor way to look at this. I think we have to talk to more people who recall outright their experiences. And that's probably a little bit better than hypnosis, hypnotically retrieved memories, although Dr. Willenfeld said memory in itself is ultimately flawed. So is there a good way to get at this? I don't know. But certainly the way it's been painted the past 20 years, I'll call it, is woefully inaccurate and incomplete and edited. Let's put it that way, too.
Well, that's the thing. Hypnosis aside, I had asked Bud Hopkins on my old Culture Contact podcast, do you include everything? And the answer is no. He has outlier data. How do you have outlier data of an unknown? That just doesn't make sense. So what he's admitting to is he's taken the unknown and shaped it into something that is knowable. Right. Which is probably because that's more presentable to the media, or maybe it's because it caters to his expectations and maybe his fears, that sort of thing. So that has nothing to do with reality.
Right. Well, I heard.
And then you add hypnosis, and it's like, woo.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that sort of critique from Melinda Leslie and the people who do the MyLab research, that, the abduction people don't want anything to do with MyLabs, where it's like, we got to throw it all in together, I guess, if we're going to try and figure this thing out, not just take bits and pieces and try and, like you said, form it into a narrative. So, it's a troubled area, the whole abduction area. I can see the people's point of view that's like, well, what do we do from here? But at the same time, it's like, kind of like to throw back to what Jeff said way at the beginning of the conversation, dude. This is the paranormal, man. We've been fumbling around blindly in the dark on all this crap. That's par for the course. So we just go back to fumbling around in the dark and not relying on the fucking equivalent of those little ghost hunting machines that don't mean shit either. I guess that's probably all we need to say about the Emma Woods episode. Is there anything else we should touch on with that? Or what the hell was Jacob's response to all this? He just sort of a no comment sort of thing?
Well, his first response was actually when we did the Lilienfeld episode, we emailed him and said, look, we want to ask him about this hypnosis tape where you basically implant the suggestion that she has multiple personality disorder. Would you like to make a comment on that? And his response was to not respond to us, but to find Dr. Lilienfeld's email and email him directly and called him the wrong name. Dear Dr. Greenfeld, which was already odd, and said, look, you don't know the whole story, blah, blah, blah. Please contact me before you do this show. Now, Lilienfeld read that to us right after we had just finished taping. He was like, oops, oh well. So then we did another episode dissecting those tapes. We again invited him back on, invited him to make any sort of statement. He just ignored us. And then eventually he said, all right, I'll tell you my side, but it's got to remain confidential. Like, are you serious? I mean, we're not the guys that you do the confidentiality thing with on this, because we're the guys trying to get the whole story out there.
Right,
but we decided to do it anyway. We kept his confidence. And essentially what he told us was the same thing that he published on his website. And it was just as unsatisfying in secret as it was in public, I mean, basically he's saying she's crazy. That's his defense. She's crazy. And but what he's admitting to is having used those tactics, because what he's saying she's crazy about is like, well, they both agreed at the time that it was the right thing to do under the circumstances. Of course, those circumstances are that he's being harassed by instant messenger by hybrid aliens. So given that, she must be completely off her rocker to now think that bunch of tactics used to throw them off was wrong. She must be crazy now, apparently. I mean, this is just like, get your mind around this. This is what this man is thinking, and now I'm like, how did he get away with this for all these years? And I don't mean that in like he's a criminal sort of way. I just mean, how did he go so long without anyone going, hey, is this guy like on a level? Because this is all kind of a little loopy. Like, how did that not happen earlier?
Well, it makes you wonder if it has, and I get the impression based on his response and everything that he's just going to wait this thing out and hope that it goes away. And I get the impression that's sort of the attitude of the abduction community. Because as you said, it didn't hit ATS. It seems like that they think they'll weather this storm, if you will, without having to change tactics or anything like that. And
they're all too emotionally invested in it. I mean,
right.
Come on.
Unfortunately, I think that they're probably right. That's not an indictment against you guys. That's an indictment against the community. The people that heard your show and the people that are listening to this are clued into what happened, but like the larger body politic of it are sort of just whistling merrily to the next abduction conference or something. They don't want to know. They don't want to be challenged at all on all this.
To that end, I mean, Emma had said that she, originally she had written to one of the places where he was going to appear. She had written to the head of the conference and said, "Look, this is what this guy has done to me. Just know that that's who you're letting be one of your major speakers." And the response she got back from the guy was something along the lines of, "Are you a hybrid?"
Oh God!
He was saying this to her. Are you a hybrid alien? It was like this is. I mean, this is the kind of just complete asinine, behavior and mindset that has plagued ufology since I've been here, since I've seen it.
Yeah, and that's a decision maker. That's a guy who's booking people for events and shit. So,
right.
I mean, that's troubling, to put it mildly. But, the UFO community is just completely fucked up as it is. I mean, we could spend all day, and we'll probably get into that right now. I mean, it's just the whole field is full of infighting and people, I think, they all want to be like the Galileo of this whole thing. So they're going to cut off everybody else at the knees, too, at the same time. And people who are so invested in the whole ETH or whatever their pet theory is that, like, they don't want anyone to even fucking put anything forward that's going to change their story.
Right. Well, this is why, again, like, I'm glad we're changing the format of our show. This is sort of, in my head anyway, I don't know about Jeff, our last attempt at raising a good community, because it's not, there's so many new podcasts out that have just come out this year. And it's not the quantity of people asking the questions, it's the quality of people. And so I feel like we need to start raising quality minds to ask quality questions.
Yeah, you wonder even, unfortunately, too, if they even want to ask questions. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's also a segment of the audience that just wants to be told what it is. They don't want to,
Unfortunately, I think that's about 85% of the field. The field, quote-unquote, the field. The UFO-interested public. I think that's 85%. They want a story. They want some kind of... I mean, this exists largely as entertainment for them, and that's what they want. They want a good story to be entertained or to sit back and laugh at the loonies. And unfortunately, nothing's getting done that way. So...
Right, and I feel like the whole field's just been stagnant anyway for like 20 years as it is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, we're not getting anywhere with this whole thing, so to the point where I've almost lost interest in general ufology. Do you know what I mean? I have to look at other avenues of ufology that might be interesting to me, such as the historical parts of it, like the 70s, 80s period, or international ufology, because there's nothing in contemporary ufology right now that is even remotely interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm inclined to agree there. I mean, I got to say, when I got into this, there was no internet, and I think that the couple of conferences that I went to in D.C. before everybody was online and there were podcasts and chat rooms and message boards and all of that, I think that, I personally found a higher level of people to talk to. These days, it seems like you go to a conference, or you have a message board. We've been really careful with our message board to, I don't want to say weed out the weak, but weed out the weak. And people who you can immediately talk to them within 5 minutes, what their ideology is with this whole thing. And we're not really interested in belief systems per se, unless in some way they pertain to an ancient culture's belief systems and how it may apply to what we're looking at. I'm not interested in people's belief systems about this. It's interesting to hear a theory, but you can't. You're building castles in the air, and that's 99.9% of everything that we see in this field is castles built in the air, because everybody's so afraid of the one fact, which is that we don't have any idea what this is about.
Right.
Everybody wants to slap the ETH thing on, or they want to strap the most famous strap on now is the interdimensional theory.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but I'll never forget it. And this is not any kind of dig on Dr. Maccabee at all, but I'll never forget going to the X conference with Jeremy. And we're sitting there at the panel discussion at the very end. I said, we're sitting here. I said, what are we doing here? This has been like my favorite mantra throughout this entire journey of Paratobi. Like, what are we doing here? We're sitting in a room where everybody thinks that this is extraterrestrially based. And I'm curious, like, how do they know that? All these people in this panel, they all seem sure of that. How do they know? And Jeremy, having balls akin to what was seen in his latest comedy flick, he stands up and goes over to the mic and he says, I'm just curious, has anybody really solidified this as extraterrestrial? And Dr. Maccabee said, well, I assume you're talking about multidimensional or anything like that. And that's a great idea. It's interesting to look at, but I don't know where to go with that. And so that was the answer that we ended up getting with a lot of people. And my answer to that was, well, can't we find out where that goes? the problem is that something like that obviously is going to require a lot of thought, number one. But number two, it may guide you in directions that aren't as engagingly interesting as your typical UFO or sighting or encounter or landing or whatever. That there may have to be some sort of, Jesus, this is the most boring shit I've ever read in my life. But you may hit upon one thread that may lead you in a completely different direction and a different line of thought on this.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do. And I hate to say it, but I feel ultimately walking away that the majority of people out in ufology aren't interested in that. And that's just really evidenced by the one woman who spoke immediately after Jeremy talked and asked this question. I hear this little voice from the audience go, "What are you here for?" It's like immediately a question like that is met with some sort of smarmy, volatile answer. I mean, is that the way this should be? I mean, I would have looked at her and said, "You don't know what the hell this is either, so who are you to talk?"
Right, right.
This is the big problem, Tim. I mean, nobody knows what it is.
So the alien thing, I mean, it's a narrative, right, that we can all understand. Human-like beings, enough like us that we can, have trade relations with and all this. I mean, it's a scenario that you can make money off of. That's what the disclosure movement is.
Yeah.
It's a money-making scheme that tells a story that everyone can understand. The only way you can really do that with interdimensional is like to say reptilians from the fourth density, which already sounds completely idiotic as soon as you use the word density.
Right.
But then then you're not, you get this narrative going of, again, beings kind of like us that could just sort of pop in and out of reality that we have some sort of trade relations with. I mean, it all gets back to beings that are just like us. And the path of least resistance for that is, of course, aliens, because we understand that from movies and just from how we know we are, and from TV shows. We just then assume and project onto them that, well, that's the way they would be. They would be just like we've seen in movies.
Right.
So you can sell that. I mean, obviously, if you can sell it in a movie, you can sell it as a conference, as a live MMO
comic book,
or Dungeons and Dragons type thing, or comic book,
Yeah, well, I've said before, too, that's ufology's dirty secret, that we don't know what the fuck's going on. And it seems like no one really wants to admit that, in the sense that they're always sort of like pushing some theory of their own without sort of just laying the baseline out there that's like, listen, we have no idea what this is. I feel like if the field sort of took a complete right turn and went at it in that direction, we'd actually have a lot more success in winning people over, the mainstream people. We were like, listen, we've been looking at this for like 50 years. We're stumped. We have no idea what it is. Instead of like, we're really, really pretty sure it's aliens. We're pretty sure. I think that seems to be what the message that's put out from ufology is. We're almost so close. We've almost proven it. We're so close that it's aliens. Just trust us.
Well, the disclosure movement is convinced that it's aliens. It's aliens, and it's just a matter of getting the government to say what they know and how long they've known it and what the relationship is that we have with them. My question to anybody is, okay, even if it's aliens, why is it that we don't treat them like aliens? Why is there nothing alien about them to us? Like, what is it about putting that word aliens on it where it's immediately like, all right, these are bipedal, humanoids who speak our language and wear clothing, and, they're just like us. They're just scientists doing experiments in the way we would. I mean, is consciousness, human-type consciousness, so universal that would be the case, with all of these beings that are reported in these multiple body types, be they reptilian, gray, Nordic, light beings? I mean, they're all basically the same thing in different bodies.
Yeah.
So how is that? How is that possible? And the thing that they are is human.
Yeah.
Well, and another way to look at it is, we also, a lot of people talk about them as though, well, these things have been here forever. They've been chariots of the gods and that sort of thing, or Zachariah Sitchin's work. Well, how long does an alien have to live on Earth to no longer be an alien anymore? I mean, if they're talking to us in English in our heads, and they seem to know us better than we do, and they've been around for at least as long as we have, how are they aliens anymore? I mean, they pretty much live here and know us, right?
Yeah, we're like their pets.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying what they are. I'm just saying what they can't be. And what they can't be at that point, under, by definition, is alien.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's another point here to be made, is that the whole narrative of the alien thing, I mean, regardless of whether you want to call it interdimensional, I don't care, crypto-terrestrial, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, whatever label you want to slap on it, I think that by now, and I'm surprised that no one has talked about this very much, I think by now, people who have had some sort of conscious experience with these beings, whatever they are, has noticed one thing, that they can drastically affect human perception at will.
Yeah.
And so my question at that point is, how do you believe anything? And I say this for myself as well. How can I believe anything that I've experienced and seen with my eyes? How can I look at that and go, yep, that's what they are. That's what they look like. I mean, I've seen subtle changes and dramatic changes in the visual apparition of these beings. Knowing that they can affect human perception to such a large degree, I'm not sure how anyone sits at a podium and says, here's your typical gray, or here's your typical reptilian, or here's your typical Pleiadian. I mean, for my money, all these things are the same thing. But I don't know. That's one thing that's always confounded me about all of it, is like, they came in a ship, they took me away, they did medical experiments, and then I woke up back in my bed. And as much as I hate to say this, and I say this about myself as well, it's like likely we didn't go anywhere. Or if we did, it's certainly, I look at all of that as like very top level experience. That's what you outwardly perceived during this experience. But there's more. And that's what we've been trying to get at with number one with this show, is like, there's more than what we're seeing here, because these things affect perception. It's going through a cultural filter. It's far more alien. I mean, I like Jeremy, I think it's amazing how pedestrian this is all viewed. I mean, my favorite guy, Terrence McKenna, said, somebody sees a disc in the air, and right away they think it's an extraterrestrial craft. He's like, maybe it was just a disc in the air.
Yeah.
And that's an abstract way of voicing it, but it's the absolute truth. I mean, we don't know what it is, and it's shown that it's not to be trusted to be perceived in such a way as to really understand what it is.
Well, here's another problem with perception, and I'm just thinking of this as you're saying it, and I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but I've heard this same female voice that I associate with abductions. I've heard her tell me things in dreams that were definitely controlled, if you want to call it that. I've heard her during an abduction scenario, which was not a dream. And I've heard her during my big I am God experience at the end of that, which was more real than anything you'll ever experience. More real than anything I've ever experienced. So these are all different scenarios in which I'm hearing this woman. So she can come into whatever state of consciousness I'm in and treat me the same way. What does that mean? What does that mean about human consciousness? I mean, and then what does it mean for like abductees who say, like, well, I had this dream. Well, it wasn't a dream. It was aliens, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, I've had the dreams that are like, they're dreams, but there's one piece of it, which is this woman's voice, which is not of the dream, which is like coming in to sort of interrupt the dream and say, look, here's the deal. Now, if I'm a different type of person, if I'm more open and maybe new agey or whatever you want to call it, I might say that entire dream was an alien abduction. Wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, I might not have the powers of discernment that I have. So I think all of that gets jumbled up into, I mean, it becomes this soup where you don't know, what is real. You don't know what the word real means anymore at that point. And you don't know why it is that there are beings that can talk to you in life just as simply as they can in a dream, because we still don't even know what the hell dreams are. We still don't know what our brain is doing, and yet we're already defining what these things are doing, and clearly they're not working by our rules. So how is it that we're defining them by our rules? I guess that's sort of what I'm getting at.
That's deep.
Yeah.
I was going to make some joke about the the Paris Hilton thing, but I lost my train of thought. It's a long story. I don't know if you heard about that, Jeff. Someone got mad at me because I said some Paris Hilton joke was deep when we did the Lost episode. All right. Well, I feel like we should move away from UFOs for a while because otherwise, we're going to keep just getting confused, I think. Makes you wonder why we're even mixed up in this, but you guys are sort of taking one foot out of it, which is an enviable position. I envy you guys tremendously, but we will continue onward with BOA for a while. Now, what about this Ghost Hunting Road Show? I'm looking at some of your previous episodes and sort of want to revisit some of these editions of the program. Tell me about this road show that you went on ghost hunting.
I think they hunted us. I mean, we actually, I wrote Mark Nesbitt, who is, the Ghost of Gettysburg guy. He's been on more television shows, and he's written a slew of books about people's experiences that he's gathered in Gettysburg and actually in I think it's Fredericksburg as well.
Okay.
He's written a couple of books about, and unbeknownst to me, he didn't live in Gettysburg. He did live in Gettysburg at one time, but it turns out he was actually fairly close to me. And so he ended up coming over to the house for his interview and coming into the home studio and doing his interview that way, which was great. And I know we more or less put him on the spot at the end of the show. Say, hey, can we come to your place and check it out? Because he's got some activity going on, and we just thought that would make a great show.
Yeah.
And we took a couple of listeners, and my wife and my kid and Jeremy, and we all piled in the car and went there and spent the night. Yeah, I mean, I think that we got some good stuff. I think that the place is definitely active, but again, there's these correlations between things that you find paranormally that seem just too coincidental to be a coincidence, such as the 3 a.m. thing. I mean, we had some minor things during the night when we stayed there. I mean, we were all up all night long, started out on the battlefield, gradually went to Mark's place, set up cameras. I think we had 2 cameras running and about 4 DVRs running, and a Macintosh with the blue snowball mic hooked up in the kitchen upstairs. All of these places said to have activity at one time or another. And small indiscriminate things throughout the night, but come to 3 o'clock, the place erupted. I mean, we had children's voices downstairs that 2 of the participants heard and recorded, and not only recorded it on their DVR sitting between them, but actually the camera in a stairwell also picked up the same voices. So we got it in 2 independent places. And I know that this is definitely one of the reports, that there have been children heard, seen. We didn't see anything. We got an interesting photograph that I think is going to end up being shown on an episode of The Haunted. But nothing you could absolutely nail down as anything concrete. But this is what we're used to with the paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
We do intend to go back there and take listeners that we've not met before to do the same thing again. This time, I bought a lot more equipment to do this. We're also planning another trip to Point Lookout Lighthouse, which is in southern Maryland, and the lighthouse is available to investigators to go in from 9 a.m., I believe, until 2 or 3 a.m. And from what I understand, being told by a couple of people who are involved with booking those dates, very few people have stayed until 2 or 3. So it's obviously active. I've heard a lot about it. I mean, I count that as one of the better episodes that we did, because we've had interesting things happening during the podcast in the way of EVP stuff and whatnot. But to be there in that place, not only with the history, but with a really paranormally very active area, was a pretty big deal. And I think Mark Nesbitt is by far one of the kindest people that we've come across in the paranormal, just as far as his absolutely trusting nature and willingness to work with us, and letting us stay alone in his place through the night. I mean, that was beyond the kindness that you'd see out of most people in this field. So, yeah, we do plan more of those. I mean, we're trying to get some stuff worked out right now with Mark and get a hold of him and get something to set up, and then we're going to take people out and see what happens. So,
okay.
It was a fun night. Definitely a fun night.
So you did it with like a legitimate good ghost hunter then, obviously. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was his place. He actually left and left us alone in the place. But he's had psychics come in. He's had big-time ghost hunter guys come in and do work. I mean, we were just another crew that came in and did our thing and walked away with some decent stuff. It's still, totally ambiguous stuff. But
although I think hearing church bells at 3 a.m, and I was the only one who heard them.
Yeah,
loudly.
Yeah, I mean, it was really weird. Yeah. I think that, for me, I know that Jason and Lisa, not my wife Lisa, but another Lisa that's a fan of the show, they were downstairs and heard the kids. I think that was the highlight of their night there. For me, it was about the time that, I don't know, it was like, what was it, Jeremy, but 4:45, 4:30, 4:15, something in there. Everybody was immediately started winding down, and when we started realizing, hey, guess what? It's almost morning. We haven't slept.
Yeah.
And so we all went upstairs into the back room, and my wife and my kid were already flaked out in the bedroom area upstairs, and Jeremy and Lisa and myself, we went to the back area of the house and sat in chairs and fell asleep. And I mean, I've said this before on the show. I can't really qualify this as an experience because I was asleep, but something woke me up. It sounded like someone walking through the kitchen.
Oh, gee.
And I had my hat down over my eyes, and I lifted my hat up, and I see women's feet wearing flat black shoes, no heels or anything like that, just flats, with what I would say is like a muumuu outfit on. I only saw it from maybe knee down or maybe thigh down, and it walked to the edge of the doorway and it walked away. And I just said, it's my wife. I said, Lisa, my wife. Put my hat back down and went to sleep. And when I woke up in the morning, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. First of all, nobody was wearing shoes the entire time. And number two, who the hell's wearing a muumuu? Certainly not my wife. So who was that? I mean, and then I thought, well, did Mark's wife come in? And I don't think she would have come in. And we asked, and she hadn't. I have no idea what that was.
That's weird. But
I damn well know what I saw.
Did you get it on tape?
It is on tape, yes. It did come across on the Macintosh, which was running full spectrum audio right there in the kitchen. And you can clearly hear the pat of like a leather shoe on the linoleum. And like I said, we had left all of our shoes out. We had been on the battlefield. It had been muddy and dirty, and we didn't want to track stuff into Mark's house. So everybody was in their socks. Nobody was in shoes. But yet you hear shoes on the floor. And it was right around that time that we had just barely flaked out. And there it is. I mean, Mark had said that sometime later they had a psychic in the house. Now, certainly a muumuu is not Civil War attire. And I don't know, as bizarre as it sounds, he said that the psychic picked up on some woman who was an Italian immigrant who didn't know where she belonged. And one of the frequent ghosts in the house that they've more or less, I suppose, identified, Mrs. Kitzmiller, she was the owner of the house, said that she didn't know who this woman was, but she was pissed off because she was messing with her kitchen. And the age, the era that this woman was, I mean, a muumuu kind of fits. It fits the part. So it's like I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is this? Like, is your house some kind of like ghost social worker house or something? It's like a halfway house. I don't know. I mean, it was really strange. And I got to say, I don't put an absurd amount of emphasis on psychics and all of that, but it kind of makes me wonder, what was that? I mean, it clearly wasn't something, I don't know. It clearly wasn't Civil War era, but it was clearly someone there. And it seems to fit the profile of what they were talking about. The woman seemed, I don't know.
Surly?
Well, I mean, I guess the legs, you could tell by looking at the legs that it was, a heavier woman. Obviously,
the ankles working, huh?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, shorter than my wife, certainly heavier than my wife, and I don't know. It just, but in my stupid state of half awake, half asleep, I just went, it's just my wife coming in to see if I'm asleep. Maybe she wants me out there. I don't know. Maybe she heard something, but I was too tired to care at the time.
Yeah.
So I can't qualify it. It's just an experience, and that's what I remember about it. But I mean, for me, that was pretty amazing stuff once I woke up.
Yeah,
so,
you're making me want to go on a ghost hunt now. This sounds cool.
Yeah, come on and go, man. Yeah.
What you guys should do, because I was kind of hoping the story was going to go in a different direction. You should try and find the nation's worst ghost hunting group, and go and go on a trip with them just to see what that would be like. A lot of beer drinking, pot smoking, little meters that don't do anything, running around.
Right.
I think I covered that in my movie, didn't I? When it just top of those two yokels
on the side of the highway. We kept waiting. Yeah. Jerry just keeps thinking in his head, well, life in a wheelchair can't be that bad, so we'll just stay here on the side of the road till
Especially when you could put the wheelchair in the back of your truck by yourself.
Okay, so then you did another road trip to the X conference, and now I know you guys were all sort of on the same page on the exopolitical movement. You guys were probably pretty much, I think you were in that zone when you went, correct? I mean, you weren't ex-con enthusiast. You were sort of more going to, I guess, see the show, if you will.
Yeah, I think I was just going to see Jeff at that point. And meet Eric Close, I think, also.
Yeah.
That was a highlight. He used to host the Noosphere podcast.
As you know, back in 1970, I started on a series called What Happened? And every time something would go wrong, I would look at the camera and say, hey, what happened? We had a lot of fun with that and a lot of other catchphrases.
You're listening to Banal of America Audio.
And that's good because that's how you establish a cult.
Well, what was your impression of, because we've talked about this when I was on your show, because I attended the original X conference, the first one, and the second one, which was sort of like a downgrade. And it sounds like you guys went to like the third or fourth one, which was by then like really into exopolitics.
Well, we went to a couple of them. I mean, did we meet? We met at the Greer one, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And the Greer one, I mean, that was like, I didn't know anything about Greer. I just knew, like, I had friends who were really into him. They're like, you just wait till you hear this guy. So I was going in there all gung-ho. And at that point, Steve Bassett had spoken at the Culture of Contact, and he had said, you're the future of this. It was like he was passing me the torch kind of thing, which I'm sure he regrets. So I was going in there, all pro whatever, not knowing anything about this stuff. And then it just turned real bad real quick as soon as anyone on that stage opened their mouth. But then the next time I went, I think I've only gone twice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the next time I went, it was just purely let's go hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting sort of crowd because, like I said, when I went there, it was just sort of the exopolitical thing was just starting, so it was a lot of big stars and shit, and it was sort of like this thing's just starting, but then it exploded, and by the time you guys went, it was like the explosion had gone gangrene or something. I don't know. So it's interesting to see what it's become like in the last few years. Although thankfully, it seems like exopolitics may be running out of steam now, especially since it's gone international, which usually is a sign of waning American popularity, at least as far as, like David Hasselhoff goes and bad shows from the 80s and shit. Seems like exopolitics has gone the way of that whole thing.
Exopolitics, who's the boss of ufology?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I don't know. I think the last one that we went to, Jeremy, I think it was equally as attended as the one prior. Yeah, I was starting to wonder if it wasn't 3 of them, but I think it was 2.
See, I thought there was 3, but I can't remember.
Maybe it was 3. I mean, that's how memorable these are.
Well, they did do one in the fall and one in the spring one year, and then they skipped a whole year, so it was a little confusing. I stopped after the second one because the stars stopped coming, and then I was like, I've seen these people fucking, once you've seen them twice, do you really need to see them a third time? That's my sort of...
well, I mean, it was kind of good to, like, go and say hi to Rich Dolan again, and it was great to hang out with Nick Pope the one day at the bar. I mean, that was all those things. That's the reason you go, is to hang out and kind of talk to these people and get a real feel for what they're really like. I found that the sociological parts of it really interesting, but I don't think you're talking about an especially astute crowd when it comes to the subject. I mean, I think one of the most regular attendees I've seen there is a little old lady with a red beaming light on her finger. I mean, who's just a cartoon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's going more in that direction of that sort of a patron than it is like really serious people who are looking for an answer of what this is. That crowd seems to already know what it is.
Right, exactly.
And I think the part of the story that I leave out when Jeremy stood up to ask his question at the panel was that Steve Bassett then became what I would say was pretty agitated, and then began pounding his fist into his hand, saying it is confirmed, it is unquestionably extraterrestrial. And we know this. Something along the lines of he can't say a whole lot, which kind of, gives the illusion that he's in the know of something with some informant of some kind.
And this was at the disclosure at the disclosure conference, mind you.
Yeah, it's like, we can't talk about this, but we're, it's just like Greer's thing, you sign your NDA before you go to to an outing, but yet, he wants this all out in public. So, I mean, I just took away from it that it's a show. I mean, it's like you want to see a Broadway show. It's a play, and the idea that somebody like Michael Sala gets a Lifetime Achievement Award there is just
that's just it. As soon as you hear crazy people talk like Sala, but Weber, I mean, I think Weber is certifiably insane, and yet he's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. Greer, who is not the most wholesome of characters, let's say, getting a Lifetime Achievement Award. I mean, these are the achievers.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, that was. I mean, I think a piece of my soul died that day.
But you got material to work with for the next 2 years. I mean, let's not forget.
But I mean, I would trade it in to have like honest people in this, because it's the weird thing of when you enter this field as an experiencer, it's like you want people to take this seriously because it affects your life, right? And so you enter it knowing that your friends who aren't into any of this stuff and only believe that you believe it but don't really believe it themselves, that sort of thing, you've got an uphill battle already, just because of the stigma of what a UFO is and an alleged alien.
Yeah.
And then you see the people who are the masters of the field, and you think, well, wait a minute, there's no solace here. Where do you turn? It's like these are the people you're supposed to be able to turn to, and that are supposed to be making this serious so that you can then turn around to your friends and go, look, there are all of these serious minds taking this seriously. This is serious. There's something real here. You've got to look at this, and there's not. I mean, it's just clowns. It's just clowns making money all around, And so I think that was really disheartening and offensive, I mean, offensive more than anything. And especially because then these are the same clowns who will turn to you and say, when you have a real criticism, they'll say, well, we're all in this field for the same reasons. We all want to get to the truth of this. So why can't we all just work together? Why can't we all just get along? It's like, oh, because you're a con artist. That's why. Or because you're dumb as a sack of wet mice. That's why. Like, we're not the same. We're not the same, you and I. And you're the one who's like on the stage, and you're the one who gets funding, and you're the one making a living at this. And I'm the one who's actually affected by it. And I'm the one who's marginalized in this marginal field, as Tim also rightly put it. So, I would trade all the jokes in the world to be able to have, like, a real field full of intelligent, thoughtful people not out to make a buck.
Yeah, well, you're barking up the wrong tree there, buddy.
Yeah.
This thing, I just feel like ufology's devolved to the point now where the best people are doing the best work fucking not even in ufology, probably. You know, like Jacques Vallée said on the show, when he said, you know, there are people looking at this, but they don't want anything to do with ufology, so you're not really going to hear what they have to say yet. I hope eventually we do, but...
Yeah, I got into a little yelling match with Bassett after, I believe, the second X conference, a little after party they had, and he actually yelled and said, you know, he was saying it's aliens. He was, once again, reconfirming the nuts and bolts thing. I was saying, you don't know what you're talking about, because part of what he said in his little fist in the hand rant was, you know, Jeremy, I'll debate you on this anywhere you want, anytime. I was like, you will? Are you insane, sir? So at the little after party, I sort of got into it with him, and he, you know, I said, well, what do you make of Jacques Vallée's work? And he's like, Jacques Vallée is like Newton. He's outdated. He's done.
How's
really?
What?
Like, yeah, like disclosure is the quantum mechanics of ufology, and Jacques Vallée is the Newton of ufology, when in fact it's the reverse. Newton would be the nuts and bolts guy. Jacques Vallée would be the ethereal, something else is going on, we need to look into it guy.
Yeah.
So, you know, just on its face, he's got that backwards. But, I mean, this is what we're dealing with. And, you know, why is it that he believes that, really? Well, probably, to bring this full circle, because you can make money saying it's aliens. You can't make money saying we don't know what this is, you know?
Yeah, and you got to wonder if it's all kind of like a shell game anyway, because you know the government will never fucking tell the truth. So if you just keep telling people that if we keep trying, they will, like, you know, all along.
I don't get why. How do people not think? This is what I don't get just about people. And again, it makes me want to, like, raise a crowd of better thinkers. Is just what Jeff said. It's like, how do you have a group of people all in a room talking about an unknown, and they will raise their hand about this unknown and ask the speaker, who doesn't know anything about the unknown, so when is the government going to come out and tell us what they know about these aliens? When is that going to happen? What's the date on that? Well, as if all of this is already set in stone and everybody in the room knows what they're talking about, because they do, because they all believe it, but they don't believe it's a belief system. They believe that they have the actual facts to hand. It's just incredible, and this is what gets sold to them. And then to question that is to be the asshole in the room who's like, well, can't we all just get along? It's like, no, you fucking retard. We can't just get along because you're conning people who want to be conned, and they want to be conned. That's the thing that gets me.
Well, and you know, but the thing is I don't think they necessarily want to be conned. I think it's part of human nature that when you're faced with a mystery, you want an answer. And I think, unfortunately, in this, people have been so desperate for an answer for so many years.
They'll take what they can get.
The young people want these things to come forth so that basically the world will change as they know it into something they hope is better. Which, number one, I question that.
Yeah.
Okay. If any revelation about this subject would ever come to light and be confirmed and be absolutely provable and demonstrable to everyone, that would be a problem, I think.
Oh, it'd be a huge problem.
But this is how the kids see it. You know, the young people see it as a way out of the mess that we're in. And I'll say this as well, that, you know, the elderly crowd see it as, you know, they're looking for Wilford Brimley on a yacht. They're looking for a cocoon, okay? They want some idea.
Brimley in the Thing? I want to come back inside.
Yeah. What is that? I don't know, but it's weird and pissed off. I mean, it's just you've got these people that are desperately seeking an answer. And the problem is that you have people out there who are perfectly willing to sell them the answer. And it tickles me to see certain proponents of all sorts of different thoughts on this, how and what to great lengths they will go to prove their theory, all the connective tissues that they will draw lines to and say, you see this? Huh? Now you understand where we're coming from? And it all seems to, you know, the person who wants an answer It all seems very plausible to them. I don't think they necessarily want to be conned. I think they honestly believe what they're being told because this field has elevated people who have come in who have an interesting thought or are well-spoken or dress well or speak well. Those are the people that are the leading lights in this. And for somebody like Bassett, I mean, I have no idea where he came from. I mean, when I got into this, there was no Stephen Bassett. I never heard of him in my life. I mean, where did he come from? What qualifications does he have to even be holding a thing like this? Is it simply an interest? Okay, that's fine. But to stand there and pound your fist and say it's unequivocally, this is the facts, it's extraterrestrial? What? Who are you? Where do you come from? I mean, this is the absurd factor to me, is that, you know, we look at all this stuff and we sit and shake our heads about it, but it's a circus. It's entertainment. For most people, that's all it'll ever be. It's a passing fancy. Very few repeat faces in the crowd that you see. You always see, I hate to say it, but most of the repeat faces you see are the woman with the little lights on their fingers. And
yeah, the freaky people are usually the ones you see frequently.
Right. I mean, yeah, they'll go time after time. You know, and the bookwormy people who are just like, you know, well, I'm very fascinated by all this subject. So I don't know. I mean, like, largely, I mean, Jeremy and I have thought about going to half a dozen other conferences out there, and we always throw up our hands and go, for what? What are we going for? Are we going to get an interview with somebody? I mean, who's showing up at this thing? And I mean, gradually, little bit, we just said, you know, the hell with all of them. We're not going to any of them. You know, unfortunately, that's the facts about these conferences. That, you know, you're going to hear somebody's theory. You might hear. I think Jeremy and I can both agree that the last X conference, we had Graham Hancock and Colin Andrews, and those were the only two guests that I would have even thought about going to see and sit in a chair and breathe up good air listening to. And that's it. And even still, at the end of Colin's presentation on crop circles, where he basically dropped the bomb that he believes this has much more to do with human consciousness than it does any alien or any kind of, you know, supernatural force like that.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big thing to come out and say when you're in his position of studying these things for most of your life. For as much as he's lost to this, and it's been a lot for him, to come up and say that takes a certain amount. It takes a hell of a lot of courage to come up and say something like that in front of all those people at a major conference. And then Stephen Bassett gets up at the end of it and says, yeah, but it's only one crop circle was alien. Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah,
you know,
that kind of
thanks. You could have gone all conference and not said that, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, you know, unfortunately, anybody who goes there to speak who has something different to say, ultimately, they're going to be marginalized just by being in that place with those people. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. That's the way it works.
Well, based on this story and based on my experiences, I'm going to have to say that Jeremy Vaney and panel discussions are a dangerous combination.
Very true.
I was afraid we were going to be beat to death, I have to say. You know.
Then you should have seen the panel discussion I saw Jeremy a part of.
I heard about that.
Yeah. I think you're just a masochist, Jeremy.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I have to say, I mean, I wish that I had the balls to stand up in front of people like that and just say what I think, and I can do that if I'm the speaker and I'm asked to be there, but just to get up out of the crowd and go up to a microphone and ask a question like that you know is not going to go over well. I think Jeremy's got, you know, cojones the size of a camel to be able to do that. So,
well,
I admire the shit out of it myself.
I was just thinking that when you said the part about the lady that was like, well, what are you here for? It reminded me of the panel discussion I'm talking about at the Mystery Weekend last year in Massachusetts. Because some person in the audience like heckled Jeremy then too. You remember that guy, Jeremy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, where he's like, well, then what about the government? Or some crazy, you know. And it was just like, whoa, who are you, dude? Where are you coming from, sir? In the audience. I don't know. So it just goes. to show you the people out there. They don't want to be challenged on this stuff.
Well, it's because it exists largely as a religion for them. I mean, Phil and Brogdon said that on our show, that, he's kind of shied away from ufology to a certain degree because it's become a religion to people. And we all know what happens when you lay question on any type of religion or doubt upon any religion that people have, belief system that they have. You don't get intelligent debate. No, I don't think anyone's ever, it doesn't, this whole notion of ufology functioning as some kind of science or pseudoscience, I think that's a joke to even say that. It focuses like religion and belief more than anything. You don't you don't see a Catholic priest coming out of Mass and saying to the congregation on the steps, well, we really tore that psalm apart 6 ways from Sunday, didn't we? That doesn't happen. You don't get points for being wrong in ufology, where you get points for proving yourself wrong in science and then postulating some other theory to pull on. That doesn't happen here. So I think what Jeremy gets by questioning these people is the venom of believers and the unquestionable loyalty that they show to whatever theory they may hold as part of their belief system. And we've seen that for years in this. That's nothing new. So, unfortunately, I think it's only getting worse.
Right. You can couple that with the stagnation aspect. I think it all can kind of tie together, because at some point ufology, I think I talked about this with Rich Dolan, that I'm still, even having read his book, I'm still of the opinion that ufology went completely off the rails like in the early 70s. And then, as he demonstrated in his new book, then it exploded into a whole bunch of different little smaller subsections: crash retrievals, abductions, crop circles, cattle mutilations. It was like, I think because ufology itself became broken, so it opened up to all these other little things that people were trying to fit into it to try and work in as clues, and then now it's just this big bouillabaisse of weird shit. And we sort of lost the thread that started this whole thing in the first place, which was fucking
even then,
unidentified
didn't it seem like
crap.
there were people studying it? Like Linda Moulton Howe was studying cattle mutilations. People were studying MJ12. People were studying whether or not there was merit to these crash retrieval things.
That's true, yeah.
Who's studying these things now? Like, who is... there are people making up the stories, like on Open Minds Forum or something, where it's just like, it's all about let's make up this sci-fi story and rope people in with it. But are there any actual investigators that really investigated any of those stories? No, because it's not about investigation. In fact, if you actually investigate something, then you're the bad guy. They don't want you to investigate anything anymore.
It
seem ludicrous. And now, as we were talking about like podcasting, now it's to the point where it's like, well, if you're going to have this glut of shows, then eventually it's just going to be cannibalism. It's going to be, well, how can I differentiate my show from the next guy? I know, I'll just start fights. And, we're seeing some of that happen now. That's only going to get worse. So what is this really about? None of it is about anything anymore. It's just people yapping to yap at this point, I think, and to maybe make a buck if they can, or to, get some sense of fame or power or whatever. And that's not just the podcasters. That's also... look at this, the Source 8 junk that just got exposed with the Pickering brothers.
I don't know anything about that. What's that?
Well, it's, that there was this, the lore that there was some sort of government, secret space program going to whatever planet. It's one of those. It's just one
Avatar.
of those. Yeah, it's Avatar. But, it completely came unraveled a couple of weeks ago. Because they got caught in a lie. And but it's like, well, it got caught in a lie because somebody thought about it for like a second and figured out what the lie was. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it wasn't like there was an investigation into this and that's what caught them in the lie. It was just like some observant person was like, wait a minute, he's saying he's talking from a top secret naval meeting, but the picture from his iPhone shows an open to the public meeting at the YMCA, or something like that. It was like that basic. So, is anybody looking into like Area 51 or Dulce or any of these things anymore? I don't think they are. I think it's just people setting up stories and getting people involved in them, like an online Dungeons and Dragons type thing. It's all ooh and ah and look at what I can do with my imagination. It really is. It's like a giant board game for white guys or something. Unimaginative white people.
Well, people who don't want to work.
Well, set up by people who don't want to work.
Yeah, I mean,
leave me and Jeremy out of this.
I mean, when you've got a guy who's got a PhD after his name, and he puts out a photograph of a dude in his Bermudas and a flower tank top, I think, and standing in front of Pine and say, "This is a giant alien." It's time to get out. I mean, there's nothing more to be said after that. Why would you even want to associate yourself with this? I mean, that's how absurd it's gotten. It's like, I'm ready to take a picture of my dog and say, look, it's an alien, you know?
Put your dog next to a Matchbox car and say, oh, my God, right. Giant monster dog. Right. I mean, that was the equivalent of it.
Yeah, well, it's even more, I think, Tim, what you mentioned about the stagnation of all this, I mean, and I think, you know, credit where it's due. I think Kevin Randall was the first guy to verbalize it in such a way that to say that ufology has become so stagnated because no one's engaging in any kind of different thinking or different. I mean, I think to some degree Kevin was an inspiration for what we wanted to do. In that one article that I read that he wrote, it's like, yeah, why isn't somebody doing something different? And why aren't these cases being followed with a harder line? You know, like O'Hare happened, and I worked on it. But after it was over, and after we got everything that we could get out of the image, and we smelled like something fishy might be going on, and it's an emphasis on a very big might in regard to the photographic stuff. I mean, where do I go from there? What do I do?
Yeah.
Who do I talk to? I mean, nobody wants to talk about that case. Nobody wants to. I mean, Christ knows the baggage guys that were down on the runway that saw this thing, they've been admonished from talking about it. If you get somebody who comes forward and says, I was there, how do you verify that they're who they are? It would just be a mess to try to even get anything out of it. There is no big Area 51 story. There is no big, I mean, Roswell's played out. Bentwaters is, for the most part, played out. All of these things are becoming classic cases, and they're
like Stephenville and Phoenix Lights, you know.
Yeah,
those are,
which don't equate to much, and you know, and of course, those cases have been turned into circuses as well. So, I mean, the stagnation breeds this whole, you know, Chet in his backyard with a couple of pine trees as an alien. That's where that comes from. It's just this absolute boredom and desperate need to put something out for people to become enthralled with.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's to make money or not is irrelevant. It's stupid, and it becomes an embarrassment to even be associated with it.
Right. It's what John Lear called on our show UFO disease, where you run out of shit, and now you got to start making shit up because you run out of shit.
Right, exactly.
Like,
was he confessing something, or?
Well, he was describing Bill Cooper. Now, Jeremy kind of touched on this tangent here, and we've talked about it off the air before, but we should probably discuss it here. What do you make of the just sheer number of fucking podcasts that have launched here in 2010? As a podcaster and as someone who's been in the podcasting industry, for lack of a better term, you know, for the last couple of years, I mean, is it as surprising to you guys as it is to me? Because I was, you know, it seems like every week at least one new podcast is launched so far here in 2010, to the point where there's got to be 24 new shows so far this year.
I draw the tangent that it's pretty much exactly like my profession as an artist. I mean, like, I started out with a brush and an ink pen drawing meat for a local supermarket, and that gravitated, you know, as technology advanced and came along, that gravitated into doing Photoshop work for ad agencies and all of that. And now, as an art director, I'm looking back on, you know, a career that I started when I was 19 years old, and I see that technology, unfortunately, has afforded a lot of quote-unquote designers a job where they probably shouldn't have one. the programs that are out there are great for the novice who wants to tinker around with images, but unfortunately it's given them an opportunity to get a job in a market that, that was slim at the start and now is oversaturated with graphic designers, quote unquote, graphic designers. And most of them, I got to be honest and say very few of them with any real training from an accredited art school and very little of them looking like anything other than the cookie cutter standard stuff that just about anyone could do. And so podcasting, same deal. The technology is becoming easier to deal with. Services are providing hosting that it's effortless to record something and put it up and call it a podcast. I'm sure there'll be some great ones. I'm sure there'll be some crap ones, but just the sheer number of them, at least in our little corner of interest. I think it just speaks to technology becoming more affordable, easier, and people want to do it. That's my gut reaction to it, is that it's just technology is becoming easier for people to deal with. Audio editing used to be difficult and time-consuming, and it still is to some degree if you want to do something decent.
Yeah.
But the technology has just made it easy, and so people are doing it.
Yeah, I just hope they don't then equate that with they're good at it.
Well, that is what will happen.
Because it's Guitar Hero at this point. It's like, I'm a master of Guitar Hero, therefore I know how to play guitar. It's like, no, right. You're actually an idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I was saying to Jeremy the other night, we were kind of talking about all this. Like, it's troubling to me in the sense that, and I'll cut the haters off at the pass now, it's not about competition to me. I could care less about that aspect of it because podcasting is on-demand entertainment, so people can listen to any show whenever they want. So if there's 30 shows or 30,000 shows, it really doesn't matter to me. But it kind of creates, for me, like an existential crisis almost, where it's like when the people who are guests become podcasters, where do I fit into all that? You know what I mean? It's like who watches the watchers at this point? If the guests are podcasters too, it sort of creates a confusion, at least for me. It's probably not felt maybe by the listeners, but it's like, well, shit, now fucking everybody has a podcast.
Yeah, well, it'll be probably the same oversaturation that we've seen in a lot of creative fields. I think you're going to see that same level of saturation come up, and eventually the ones that are good will hang around and will have a following, and the ones who aren't probably won't for very long. I could say at least, what cracked me up was my current boss where I'm working now. I think it was, a couple of Christmases ago, I did him a painting for Christmas, and I gave it to him, and he saw my name at the bottom. He's like, "You painted this?" I said, Yeah, sure. And he's like, "Oh, so you're like a real artist." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I am." So that immediately just says to me that somebody like that who's not in the field of what I do and just knows to look at an image and critique it or say he likes it or doesn't like it, he doesn't view people who do digital work as real artists. I think you'll find the same thing in podcasting. I think someone will listen to you and will listen to, who the hell ever. And say, thanks. And we'll say, wow, it's not even a comparison. This guy really knows what he's doing. And this person clearly doesn't.
Now I feel bad. I didn't mean.
No. I know what you mean.
I didn't.
I mean, it's like.
Yeah.
I think it's what it's going to come down to, and it's going to come down to the level of guest. It's also going to. Not every guest is going to want to be asked stupid questions. So I have to believe that some of these people will be so inept at what they're doing that they'll screw up the easiest person to ask questions to. Somebody like, how do you screw up Stanton Friedman? But I'm sure there'll be people who will do that. And so then Stan's not going to want to go on those shows. And so he'll go, well, yeah, Tim writes me, I'll go on. I think that's it's kind of like your defense against what you're talking about. It's like, why would they need me?
Yeah.
I think because you provide the format that frames their their work in a quality way, and I think that means a lot when you're saying that. So, I mean, you'll be defined as the real artist in this group, I think.
Well, I think once again, it also comes down to the audience. The audience has to be smart about what they spend their time on, because once again, I mean, you leave it to the podcasters, and the one guy drawing hand turkeys, and the other guy's Picasso, and the hand turkey guy's going, "Look, I'm doing art too. I did a hand turkey. We're on equal ground here." And the other guy's, "Well, but I'm Picasso." So it's up to the audience to decide whether the hand turkey is of equal value to the Picasso painting. So if there's a glut of stuff, I think, well, I'm tempted to say it will go away based on no listenership, but probably the really dumb people will be so enamored with hearing their own voices that it won't even register to them that nobody's listening to them, just so long as they're talking, you know, as long as they can hear themselves. But they'll just be talking in a vacuum, and you know, you won't really have to worry about it, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I mean, I think people who write their own books and, you know, all of that, and are now starting to do their own shows, well, hell, I wrote a book and then did a show, so who am I to talk? But I never really used it to promote the book, oddly enough. But I think those people will work better bouncing off of someone else than they will promoting themselves through their own show, because then it'll look like an infomercial as opposed to a conversation.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't have any faith that the audience is smart. So,
oh, no.
yeah, I said it. I have no faith that the audience won't be like, yeah, that show is great, too.
What come you don't do those guests, Tim?
Yeah. No, I mean, I really, because everyone's the problem, right? We're talking ufology, so the problem is everyone. Everyone needs to just get with the program here.
Yeah.
Well, that's why. Go ahead.
And this doesn't mean everybody by any stretch. I mean,
my views are not represented by Jeff Ritzman.
No, that's it's not even that. It's, you know, we can't sit around and say everybody's at fault, and you know, that's not.
No, not everybody, but there does have to be some amount of. I mean, again, like, I'll just take it out of podcasting. Let's go to the disclosure movement. You know, once you go there and see that these people are lying or morons, then why do you go back? Well, I go back either to have a laugh or to visit with you, you know, and for the one or two gems there. But there are people who will just go back and back and back because they believe it, and they're the people who are buying it. Yeah. So that's the audience. Now, that audience starts listening to podcasts. Are they going to be discerning, or are they going to glom onto the same old crap that they're used to?
Right.
I mean, there has to be some level of discernment there.
Absolutely.
For any podcast to mean something.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I think there are people out there that are interested in saying, you know, all three of us sitting here, I think there are people out there who are interested in different ways of looking at this, looking at it in a critical way, going in completely different directions, unpredictable directions, and maybe making some progress on this. The unfortunate part is just what I said on the podcast episode for us that I left on, which was you're in the minority. You are a minority in this, if that's how you think. I think the vast majority of people are all too willing to accept any answer that comes down the pike so long as it fits in with their own perceived notions of what's going on. So I think those who are open to any explanation or don't really subscribe to a theory but are just fascinated by, even if they're fascinated by the social aspects of all this, that's great too. But we're in a minority here. This is not a field for us. And so when, Tim, you said when Dr. Valet came on, he talked about there are people working on this, but they don't want to be associated with ufology. What does that tell you?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, people have been asking me, are you going to write your book even though you're getting away from this? And my answer's been, yeah, but I don't know if I'll publish it, because why are you going to, by the same token that people that Dr. Valet knows about who are working on this and won't be associated with this, so you'll probably never see their work. To publish that work and to give it to this field is the equivalent of, I don't know, me painting an perfectly accurate representation of the Mona Lisa and then doing it in 5 years and then taking it out on the living room floor and taking a shit on it. That would be, I would sooner do that than to submit something to this field. If I could selectively submit it to to people like your audience, our audience, those kind of people, then I'd do it. But, and maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe I'll start a mailing list and do it that way. But, to give it to the field at large for what? I mean, what is that going to do? It's not going to do anything. It's not going to change anybody's mind. It's not going to make anybody think. I mean, you're not going to make any progress in this field. I mean, progress is what you try to do, and it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So, because they don't want that. They want the same old, same old. So as we speak, Jeremy and I are building a flying saucer that will be flying with the aid of a crane to take photographs of, and we're going to be the next big thing.
That's right. Please don't put that part on the air.
Yeah, we don't want to ruin the whole crane part. Yeah,
keep that to yourself, right?
And I should clarify too. Like, I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Even though there's a glut of shows that have started in the last year, I'm not saying they're all crap or anything like that either. It's just, how do you separate the wheat from the chaff? Who has time for that? I don't have time to fucking figure out which ones are good and which ones are bad when there's a new one every week.
Well, I just wish podcasters would ask themselves what they're in it for and be honest with themselves about it, and maybe that would help. Because if it's just like, well, I want to hear myself, or, well, I think I'm going to get famous and then write a book, or whatever, if it's some not real reason, then why do it? I mean, it's just not helpful. I mean, what is it that you want to do? Help yourself or help the subject or what? I mean, I don't get it. I don't get, like, what is there not enough out there already that you're listening to these people on?
Yeah, well, that's the other kind of unfortunate part, too, is there's sort of this air lately of, like, well, everyone else is doing it, so I better do it. Like how everyone all of a sudden had blogs. Like, it's like, well, shit, fucking neighbor Joe has a podcast, dude. I better get going and get my own podcast because I got to keep up with the neighbors and stuff. When it's like, at least for me, that's not what this is about. I didn't start this podcast to keep up with anybody or anything like that. So it's like you don't have to have a podcast to keep up with the other sites or something. I don't get where, that mentality comes from. But I guess it's from
do you think it's got something to do with the whole thing of people wanting to be celebrity? I mean, I keep thinking of that commercial while you guys are talking, This just in from Facebook and Twitter, out to get cute boots.
Yeah.
I mean, is it on some level, it's that desire for celebrity? Like, I'm watching Lewis Black the other day, and he's like, if you Twitter, you're a fuckhead. Nobody gives a shit what you're doing. I mean, and it is true. I mean, is it on some level, I think the technology's there. It's easy. Everybody wants to be heard. I mean, that's a basic human tenet, right? Everyone wants to be heard. Everybody feels like they have something to say, and they should be able to say it. But unfortunately, like one internet lecturer I heard say a while back, the web gives everyone a voice, but probably most of them shouldn't have one.
Well, that's the thing.
I don't know how true that is, but I mean, it's,
Well, but it is true that there's no respect anymore, or less respect, I should say, nowadays, in general, for craft and for what is actually a skill. Mm-hmm. And I think, when you have a level playing field like that's what happens. Everyone thinks, well, I'm an artist. I don't have to go to school for that. I don't have to learn technique. I don't have to have a mind that, works properly, I mean, illiterate people I know of illiterate people who want to write books. It's like, well, why come I can't write a book? It's like, well, because you can't spell words. And LOL isn't a word, it's like, but this is what we've become as, here we get into our episode with Maggie Jackson, who wrote the book Distracted. I mean, this is just sort of the downfall of Rome at this point is what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and it extends even beyond the paranormal field, so it's not like this. It's just the fucking human race, man. They stink.
Well, it might be an American phenomenon, too, of just the whole I deserve, me thing. Yeah. And then having access to be able to express yourself at your fingertips. It's like having access to express yourself does not equal that you have something worth expressing. And let's define that. How about something that enriches the life of the listener? Do you have something to say that will benefit the listener or will in some way illuminate you in the process of saying it? Because if not, Get off the pot.
Oh, man. We've talked here for like 2 hours, and you guys have lives and shit, and I do too, so we'll sort of head toward the close here now.
Okay.
You know, you're taking the whole podcasting thing in a different direction, which I like, which is this user content, which we've already talked a lot about. So I guess just sort of give us a teaser on what kind of stuff people are going to be hearing from. It's still going to be called Paratopia, I presume, right? You're not going to give it a new name or anything like that, right?
Right.
So what can people expect from Paratopia 2.0 when it gets rolling in a couple weeks?
They can expect a listener interview. The first episode is Jody Heckman, who is Mudhog on our message board, interviewing Dale Graff, who was one of the heads of Project Stargate, or government remote viewing program. And I get to ask a few questions in there, too. And it's a fantastic conversation that covers almost everything we've covered throughout our show. I mean, pretty much everything except the Trickster gets covered in that episode. So that'll be episode 1. So I think that's the perfect way to start it off and to set the bar high. We also have another episode that is purely a listener's story, which is absolutely fascinating, and another which is Dr. Rourke and David Roundtree, who basically just started riffing off of some questions I had on our forum regarding their work with ghost research and wormholes. You know, what is the actual sort of quantum mechanics behind what they're saying? And so they sort of take it from there. So, I mean, it's still going to be the high quality and, you know, deeper questions being addressed podcast. It's just going to be a lot less of us doing it. And we'll come in and do specials every now and then. But mostly it's going to be listener generated. And I think Jeff and I will just sort of do the intros and the outros.
Right.
Nice, yeah. Are you looking forward to sort of pulling back from being, well, you're still going to be producing, I guess, pulling back from being a public figure, I guess you could say, in the field. Although I'm sure you're still going to be, you know, public figures, but sort of maybe in a less prominent spot, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm fumbling for words here, but I think you kind of get the point of what I'm getting at here.
Well, I think if it works, it'll be great. So I'm psyched for that. I think, Jeff, and I guess you can speak to this, but you've sort of told me that you've always had a problem with being in the limelight. You've never really, you haven't liked the taste of it that you've had. Right?
No, not particularly. I mean, unfortunately, it's a necessary evil if you want to talk to other people and, you know, in a mass communicative way, which I've always found it kind of like, you know, taking a survey or, you know, what's the best way to get a hold of people who look at things a little bit like yourself, and that we've done. I mean, that we've definitely attracted a crowd that's tired of the crap and that is willing to look at different things, even though we may not all agree at the same time. It's been a great tool for that. I mean, I love our listeners that we've met, and God knows they've supported us like crazy with all sorts of stuff. And I feel horribly guilty for just kind of walking away from them on episode 65 or something. But, you know, it's like when you step back and you take a look at what your life's been involved in this, and I guess the level of aggravation and frustration and just outright sadness sometimes versus the level of return that you get, you find it's sorely lacking. And so you decide, hey, I'm 43 years old. I'm going to do something else besides this, which isn't giving me a great return. But as far as being public figure, no, I'm not big on that. I don't think that I deal well with people. I think I think anybody who's visited our message boards knows that, you know, I'll put up with bullshit all of one time, and then Jeremy will say, you know, you better watch it because Jeff will drop the hammer on you in a heartbeat. I do, and I don't think twice about it. So I guess I'm just extremely non-tolerant in my old age, and just sick of the constant state of alert and defense that you have to be on to be in this field. And so, you know, I mean, for me, I'm personally, my life right now is pretty sweet, and all without, you know, having to do a whole lot of paranormal stuff. So I'm definitely doing the ghost thing. I mean, as early as next weekend. So I'm still in that, still poking around that way. But I don't know. I feel like, and Tim, maybe you've noticed this, I don't know, but you get listeners who know there's a boundary between you and the show that you do, and you get ones that don't.
Yeah.
And you get some that, I mean, I've kind of held this thing throughout the years that I've been online talking to people. I mean, I go as far back as early AOL and hosting chats on AOL for a couple of different forums that were on there. And I've always held true to the one thing that I would never say anything online that I wouldn't say to somebody's face. And I think that doesn't hold for most of the people out on the net. I think that they're perfectly willing to say whatever they want about you or to you. And I don't react well to that at all. So, I mean, I take probably a lot of it a little too personally, but that's who I am. I mean, I can't change that at this age.
Right. Well, people think.
Did you ever think that, like, they get a little too familiar with you, like they don't really know you, they only know you through the show? I mean, that kind of thing. Like, I get decidedly uncomfortable about that.
Well, yeah, I think I can see what you mean. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of guarded on this show more, but on the Lost Cast, you know, I kind of let it rip, as Jeremy knows from the Whale Watch story. And the story of how I almost died eating chicken kickers. So I sort of opened things up a little on there. But on this show, I try to keep myself out of it as much as I can. But I know exactly what you mean. And it's sort of like, I don't want to get into this like, woe is me stuff. But, you know, some people think, well, you're a public figure in this field, so you're open to criticism. And I mean, I can understand critiquing the program, but I don't understand. Like for this way, I'm fine if someone's like, but all of America sucks. That's fine with me. Okay, I'm like my own harshest critic, so I can probably see exactly their point of view on why we suck. But Banal's a fucking asshole. That's not cool, dude. Like, I don't get where. Like, I have a big disconnect there where it's like, what gives you the right to say that, dude? Like, sorry, I'm just trying to do this shit and produce it and have people enjoy it and put it out there for free. So if you don't like it, go listen to something else. Don't call me an asshole. Like, I don't get it. But what are you going to do? You know, that's the thing where, you're, you know, like I said, it's an enviable position that you guys are in because there are times when I want to throw my hands up and say, I wish I could go back to just being an asshole on a message board instead of, you know, a host of a show that has to put up with the slings and arrows of
people you don't even know.
Yeah. Just people that have nothing better to do than personally attack you. It's like, I don't need that crap.
Well, and I think that's a hobby for some people. I mean, I really do. I believe that is, I think there's a lot of people out there who just thrive on negative attention. And I think that when you put yourself out there as doing a podcast, I mean, even something that's so innocuous as audio. I mean, it's audio. It's not like you're on TV or something. You know, I told Jeremy, I said, my God, can you imagine, like, I mean, we all sit back and we laugh and we shake our heads at stuff like Lindsay Lohan and all of this. You know, I mean, we look at like, oh, God, she's such a waste case. But does anybody ever stop and think about the fact that these celebrities don't even live on this planet? I mean, can you imagine living that lifestyle? And then at that age that she is, I mean, can you imagine, like, it's done? I mean, I'm a millionaire. I don't have to work again. Yeah. Like, where's the challenge of the rest of your life? And I think I mean, by no means do I compare us to Lindsay Lohan, but just the measure of celebrity that a podcast affords you in the neighborhood of 500,000 people listening to you. I mean, that's a lot of people. And so in some small way you do get that. And then you have to deal with what comes from it. But you didn't like bank on that. That's not like why you're doing it. That's where I had a problem. But I guess I was dumb and I should have expected this. And, you know, and now that it's kind of reared itself, I'm not that hep on it. And
well, the thing I didn't expect was, you know, like other podcasters coming after you. And we had a situation where, and we didn't say this on the show, but there was one show that just, you know, praised the Emma Woods stuff in one breath, but then said, well, I think, you know, Jeff and Jeremy were manipulative with her in some way.
Yeah.
Didn't qualify that. And the person who alerted me to this was Emma Woods, who wrote me an email saying, did you hear this? Do you want me to write to this guy and tell him he's off his rocker? And I said, no, it's just par for the course. But she wrote to him anyway and CC'd me on it. And I haven't heard a retraction or an apology or anything like that. And I'm certainly not expecting one, but I just think that there's so many ways to come at this negatively, be it as the anonymous person on the message board who has the hobby of being an asshole, or the egocentric person who's jealous that they weren't involved in a case, so they're going to try to tear you down, or, the ex-friend or whatever who comes after you because now is their chance to get you in public or whatever. All of these various ways, and there's really, very few ways to be positive about it, which is just to, keep it honest and have an honest interest in some of these larger questions.
Right.
And then you put all that together with the internet, which, as Jeff has already said, has been the bane of ufology's existence, because I think it caters to the id. It caters to the anonymous person being able to, be an asshole. It's empowering to, to people who are sort of weak, and this is their chance to bully.
Yeah, yeah. Not to drag this out too much longer, because I know you got to get going, Jeff. But, it sort of goes also into what Jeremy and I have talked about off the air, that thankfully it's a small segment of the audience in the community, but there's, people out there, and I'm sure some of them are listening right now, who Jeremy and Jeff and me and all the other shows out there, we're like just some fucked up reality show to these people, and they want us to fight each other, and they're always sort of pitting us against each other, or going on one forum and then going on the other forum, and it's thankfully my audience knows by this point that I'm not playing those games, and you guys have sort of pulled out of that whole scene too, but it's really just, that's the unfortunate part that makes me so annoyed with everything, where it's listen, dude, agitating me is not your entertainment, and trying to pit one show against the other and stuff,
Isn't it enough to talk about aliens? What?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. At what point was that not normal? I mean,
yeah. Yeah, it's this paranormal shit's boring. I want to see these paranormal podcasters fight each other. It's you know what, dude? Sorry, but I'm not playing those games. This is bullshit.
The analogy that I come up with for trying to speak publicly about stuff is that number one, if you come across and you talk about things with absolute honesty, number one, no one will believe you. Which was never, at least, I can't speak for Jeremy, but that was never my goal, was to get everyone to believe me. My goal in this was to find other people who go, you know what, Jeff, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I've done that. I've had that. So in a way, I consider all this a big success, being involved publicly and speaking publicly and all of that. But being involved and doing investigations and then presenting your data and trying to back that up in an ironclad way that you've done the good work. It's like being in a cactus patch. It's like if you've got a needle poking you in the knee and you step back to address it, the next thing you know is one's getting you in the back of the neck. It's that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
With this. It's it comes from all directions, and it could come from any number of people. Some of them well thought of, some of them a joke. But nonetheless, you feel this need to address it, but then you shouldn't, and then you should just go on and do your thing. But you can't help but respond. So it's like this. Ooh,
yeah.
It's how do I get out of this patch? And like I said to Jeremy, the best way to do it sometimes is just to study on your own and do what Relay's contacts are doing, is just to study this on your own, to draw your own conclusions to it, to ignore pretty much what everybody else says. I think everybody would be better off, personally, to do that. Just kind of take it upon themselves to decide for themselves what's good evidence, and then not try and ram it down everyone else's throat.
Exactly. Yeah.
That seems beneficial to me. So I certainly wish you luck keeping up with Banal, and I think you're gonna. I think you're going to come out on top of this sudden wave of mediocrity that may be coming. Who knows? It could all be good, and then everybody does well with it. But I don't know. I just compare it to my own career and say I don't know. I think either way, you don't have anything to worry about.
Oh, well,
So
thanks, dude.
Keep doing what you're doing, you know?
Well, you guys are primed to really change the face of paranormal podcasting in a big way, so I'm excited for what you guys are doing. So it's a mutual love here.
See if it works.
But isn't that what Aloha to Paratopia was supposed to be in the first place? Much like Aloha to Lost, we didn't get any answers. No, I'm just kidding.
We got a lot of bitching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a lot of bitching. And, you know, it's all about the characters anyway, as Jeremy said on the last episode of Paratopia. And fuck them.
Wow, you listened.
Of course I listened.
Nice.
And so I want to thank you guys so much for giving us so much time and coming on here and really letting loose and being open and honest with your feelings about a whole bunch of different stuff. And, you know, I'm looking forward to what you guys have cooking. I think it's really cool, and you're empowering the audience, which is awesome. And I'm hoping to see some really cool stuff from people. I know Sandy will not participate, but he'll be listening.
Oh.
Yeah, that one wasn't intentional either. And so I know, dude. I do it when I'm talking to Jeremy, just not even taping a show. It's embarrassing. I feel so bad for Sandy.
It's embarrassing how much we talk about Sandy.
It really is.
Sandy's awesome.
I know. Sandy is awesome. I just wish Sandy was like a gorgeous woman, because then she'd be enamored with how much we talk about her. But unfortunately, Sandy's probably just some burly former Marine who wants to beat us both to death. But
well, now he does.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I want to wish you guys the best of luck with the new incarnation of Paratopia. You're sort of going against the wave here, and it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to it. And if there's anything I can do to help you out, I've already sort of passed along some folks to Jeremy to consider for future editions of the new Paratopia. And excellent. I'll be popping on there probably to promote some stuff in the fall anyway. So we'll be in.
Not a chance. You're not getting the mic, Tim. Just stay where the fuck you are.
I'm a former guest, dude. You already extended the invitation.
Oh, yeah. Right. God damn it, Jeremy. What did you do that for?
And a former co-host at one point.
There you go.
So, yes.
That's right.
So anyway, thanks again for coming on the show, guys. And folks can find out all about it at paratopia.net. Apparently, paratopia.com is some kind of Asian porn. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yeah. Try and stay away from that.
Yeah, so I don't know how Paratopia in Japanese means, you know, small-breasted schoolgirl. Who knows?
I should mention on a serious note, while I'm dealing with these two adolescents, that 1 through 70 of our podcast is now available on paratopia.net because we switched to cyberears.com. So go check them out. But, you know, also, instead of just getting, Jeremy, the past 20 episodes or 30 episodes, now they're all up for everybody to get 1 through current day. So
nice.
That's a big plus for us. In the recent couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, like, people who are just discovering you guys tonight or here on this episode can go back now, and you've got 70 episodes to dig into, and they should do that. So the complete archive is available, you know, so go back and relive the memories.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like Lost, you already know there's no answers at the end, so it's really not worth listening to.
But we're all going to die, so.
Yes, that's the big surprise here at the end of the show, that Jeff, Jeremy, and I all died. So, but at different times, so don't worry about it. You know, we haven't died yet, but we're meeting here for the Paratopia Aloha episode. Anyway.
As long as Evangeline Lilly is there when I go, I'll be fine.
Speaking of adolescents.
Oh, man. Anyway, thanks again for coming on the show, guys. Best of luck with the new Paratopia. Folks, tune in, paratopia.net.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
That does it for this week's edition of BOA Audio Season 5. Big, super huge thanks, of course, to Jeremy Vaney and Jeff Ritzman of Paratopia. Be sure to check out the new incarnation of Paratopia, which will be coming soon to their website, www.paratopia.net. And be sure to dig into their archive. Tons of great episodes, including one featuring me as a guest and one with me as a co-host. So I pop on to Paratopia here and there, but there's tons of interviews there worthy of your time. So check out paratopia.net. Moving right along now, it's time for BOA Audio listener feedback, and we're going to focus this time around on a little discussion that took place on the official BOA forum, the usofe.com, THEUSOFE.com. That's the official BOA forum, BOA's paranormal playground. And a little discussion broke out in the Paul Stonehill episode thread, and I thought maybe I would address it here on BOA Audio listener feedback. So let's dive in. The first thing comes from GT Talk, and here's what he has to say. First of all, let me say I enjoy the show and the website, but I've thought about this for quite some time and have never brought it up before. Tim, you do a great job, but when you preview a guest, you give out so much information that I no longer feel any real need to listen to the whole show. It's kind of like the movie trailers that give the whole plot and ending away. Just wondered if anyone else has noticed, or maybe I'm just not listening enough to get it. Anyway, good overall job, and thanks for the work and interviews that you do. And then later on, Area 51 chimes in, yeah, I always just skip to the 10-minute mark and start listening from there. Of course, you should introduce your guest, but I personally prefer a C2C style introduction of about 15 to 30 seconds. It's probably the same with audio as it is with writing. People want dialogue, not exposition. Anyway, that's a minor gripe. Everything past the 10-minute mark is great, except the outro. I don't listen to that either. Oh man, so he's not even hearing what I'm saying here. Well, anyway, thanks to Area 51 and GT Talk for bringing up this issue. I think there was a bit of confusion down the line, because later it seemed to become a little more clear that GT Talk was talking about our lengthy recaps that we post at BOA, possibly. I'm not sure yet still what exactly he was talking about, but I'm going to talk about both those things now. When we started the show, originally, the intros and outros were like super short, so they've gotten progressively longer over the years, much to my chagrin. As far as the little brief sort of recap of what we're going to be talking about at the beginning of each episode, that's really just a force of habit. I've never considered where it came from or how I ended up doing it or whether or not I should do away with it. So that's something that just completely lit a light bulb over my head, saying, maybe I should think about changing things up a little bit at the beginning of the show. I mean, we have to do some in-house notes at the beginning for sure. And the outro, I like to think of as sort of when we can all kick back, have a cigarette, and talk a little bit after the program, sort of the come down from the lengthy interviews. So I don't expect any changes in that regard. But I'm talking to the folks who are the hardcore listeners here who tune in every week. What do you think? Should we do away with the thumbnail preview at the beginning of the show? I think that's really all we could merit eliminating, because I do like to do the full bio of the guest at the beginning. But if we could cut it down somewhat, that might be the area we do. So I don't know. We're open for feedback from folks on that for sure. With regards to the super lengthy recaps that we post at BOA, that's actually one of my favorite aspects of the program, and it has sort of a secondary purpose behind it. Not only is it to provide a lengthy recap of the program for folks who are checking it out, not sure if they're going to listen to it or not, they want to get an idea of what's in there, but the big thing is that it really helps with search functions. And by that I mean, let's take last week's episode with Paul Stonehill as an example. We talked about Tunguska, and in previous editions of the program we've talked with other guests about Tunguska. I believe I talked about it with Nick Redfern and Greg Bishop on one of the Year in Review specials. So like the whole point of these massive recaps is to provide a sort of super database of audio talking points for anybody who searched BOA and then wanted to go through all the different interviews to find the different segments, if that makes any sense. In an ideal world, we'd have it where you could do a search for Tunguska and then all the little segments from all the different interviews where we covered Tunguska would come up and you'd be able to hear them, but let's face it, that's complicated and I don't have the time or the technology to put that sort of thing together. But at least here now, you could punch in something like James E. McDonald or APRO, and then you're going to get a list from our search folks, and that'll tell you which different BOA audio interviews have featured discussion on those different topics. So I kind of think of the massive text recaps for each interview as going into a huge database of potential investigatory tools for future researchers of the esoteric. So Little peek behind the curtain as to why we do what we do here at BOA Audio and on the website. Thank you to Area 51 and GT Talk for having the chutzpah to critique the stylings of the program. I really appreciate that. I do not take offense, of course. I know there is a segment of the audience that just skip right over the intros and probably aren't even listening to the outros, but to those folks who are listening right now, the hardcore BOA Audio listeners, we all know that the people who shut it off when the interview's over are missing out on some of the best stuff here on BOA Audio, talking about, of course, listener feedback and the fun hijinks we have here at the end of the show. On a similar sort of tangent here, though, I should say that due to what Area 51 says and what GT Talk says, I'm considering sticking sort of a little mini ad in the middle of the program where we do the BOA Audio tag each week to try and at least reach the people who aren't listening at the end of the program or the beginning of the program and let them know we need donations, because some of those folks aren't tuning in to the end to know that we need the donations and that you can make donations. And, of course, since these people clearly don't want to listen to me talk randomly on my own, I'll try and make the little mini ads short so they can't fast forward through them. It's like TiVo here. I'm fighting an uphill battle all the time. Nonetheless, that may be a new feature here on BOA Audio. All you hardcore listeners who tune in to the end of the program, you can shake your fist in rage at the people who don't tune in at the end of the program, because they're the reason why we've had to add the little mini ad. But don't worry, we won't be oppressive about it, because I just can't stand oppressive requests for donations. You know I need your help. I know that you know that I need your help. There's no point in beating a dead horse. There you go. That's BOA Audio listener feedback here for this week. We'll try and get back to the classic stylings of BOA Audio listener feedback next week with pure emails, but trying to change it up a little bit here and there, add some different flavors to this segment. For those folks who want to get in touch with me and be a part of BOA Audio listener feedback in the future, here are the means to do it. Go to BanalofAmerica.com and click the contact button. That's very simple. Or just write to boaaudio@hotmail.com. That'll reach me via email. And the other method is, as discussed here this week, the official BOA forum, the usofe.com, THEUSOFE.com. It's BOA's paranormal playground. Lots to talk about the paranormal world, of course. Lots to talk about pop culture as well. We like to have a balanced diet of interests at the official BOA forum, and we're always welcoming new members, so come on over and join in on the fun. And if you're a part of all those different social networking sites, you can get a hold of me through those as well. I'm on Facebook, MySpace, Twitter. Just go to BOA. You'll find the linkage there to all my profiles on all the different social networking sites. No matter how you get in touch with me, if what you have to say is interesting or compelling or pithy, we'll try and include it here at the end of the program in a future edition of BOA Audio Listener Feedback. Up next, of course, it is the thanks portion of the show. Allow me to tip my hat and give a hearty thanks to all the great BOA staffers: Leslie, Chiron, Regan Lee, Joe V, Tina Senna, Rochelle Hawks, Richard Thomas, A.M. Murphy, Marla Pena, our contributing cartoonist Andy Carolyn, and our webmaster Jeremy Boston. Since the last time you heard from me, we've got 3 new columns posted at BOA. Leslie continues her discussion on stones and the esoteric elements behind them, shares a very compelling story regarding her use of stones to possibly cure back pain. That's Leslie's Gray Matters. Marla Pena's Shadow of the Shinigami recounts her recent vacation to Marrakech, Morocco, including a number of really cool pictures from her trip. So you definitely want to check out Shadow of the Shinigami at BOA via Marla Pena. And finally, Medusa's Ladder from Rochelle Hawks looks at the trickster dynamics behind the TV program Hell's Kitchen. I'm a huge Hell's Kitchen fan, so this one was totally engaging, and I think folks who dig Hell's Kitchen will love this article from Rochelle Hawks. That's Medusa's Ladder at BOA. We got a whole bunch of other stuff in the pipeline from the BOA staffers. You definitely want to check out Banal of America, not just to peruse BOA 2.0, but also to read the columns from the BOA staffers. We say it week in and week out, but it is the truth, my friends. If you're only listening to Banal of America and you're not reading the columns at BOA, you're only getting half the story. BOA, make it a part of your everyday search for esoteric news and opinion. I've already kind of beaten the horse a bit here regarding donations, so there's no point in me harping on it. How do you make a donation to Banal of America? There's two methods now. Of course, there is the PayPal button. Nice and easy. You just go to banalofamerica.com. It's right there on the homepage. Click that. That'll bring you to PayPal. They'll walk you through the process. What if you don't trust the internet? I don't quite trust it myself, but I'm forced to work within its confines. But some folks simply will not do PayPal donations, but they want to help out BOA. How do you do that? We've taken care of that whole situation for you in recent weeks. You can mail a donation to our P.O. box. Here is the address for that. Tim Binnall, Binnall, P.O. Box 232, Pinehurst, Mass. 01866. And you spell Pinehurst, Pine, obviously, P-I-N-E, Hurst, H-U-R-S-T. You can just put M-A for Mass, and the zip code, once again, 01866. And as always, no donation is too small, and all donations go towards BOA and BOA Audio to help keep the website and the podcast series up and running, freely available, and commercial-free for all of our great readers and listeners the world over. Next week on the program, I can't give you much of a preview because I'm actually taping the interview in a couple of days, but I can tell you who the guests will be. They are Marie Jones and Larry Flaxman, joining us to talk about their new book, The Deja Vu Enigma, covering not just deja vu, but a whole host of bizarre mental states and the nature of reality itself. It's going to be a mind-blowing episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. I had a blast last year talking to Marie and Larry, so I'm really looking forward to sitting down with them in a couple of days to tape the interview. It's going to be ultra fresh when it reaches your earbuds next week on the program. That's Larry Flaxman and Marie Jones, The Deja Vu Enigma, on BOA Audio Season 5. And on that note, we close the book on this week's edition of the program. Once again, big, super huge thanks to Jeremy Vaney and Jeff Ritzman. Thanks to Area 51 and GT Talk of the USOE.com for their input for BOA Audio listener feedback. And, of course, most of all, a huge, hearty thank you to all the great BOA Audio listeners out there. You guys are the best, the fuel that drives the BOA machine, especially you hardcore listeners that stick around all the way to the end. You guys rock. Thank you so much for making BOA Audio a part of your esoteric audio playlist. Until next time, this is Tim Binnall, thanking you for listening and signing off.